Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for April 22nd, 2019. Please all stand and we'll salute the flag. Mr. Penny?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Where's my list of candidates? You got a list for me that can read? Tonight's meeting is to interview candidates for the position of town administrator. We have 3 solid candidates here, and the interviews will start at 6, go up at 7 and 8. The first candidate would be Anthony Ansaldi.
Chairman, if I could introduce Anthony Ansaldi.
Anthony, how are you?
Anthony, how are you?
Welcome to the town of Rockland. Larry Ryan.
Nice to meet you.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Okay. We're going to start today with Mr. Penny. He's going to lead us off with the questions, and he's the fellow to the right here.
Okay.
So Anthony, thank you very much. We really appreciate your the application. I got a chance to look at it, and excited that you're one of the finalists. So thank you for the interest in the community. We'd like to take a few minutes to tell us about your specific interest in and qualifications for this position. How do your qualifications and experiences match up with the challenges and opportunities detailed in the position profile?
Thank you very much. Some of my qualifications, I think you've had an opportunity to look at my resume. I have a master's, MPA from Suffolk University. I'm committed to continuing education and professional development. I participated in the Certificate in Local Government Leadership and Management. For the past 2 years in Littleton, I've been having an opportunity to work on a lot of the same projects that actually Rockland is working on. One of those being economic development. I know that you're downtown, you're looking to revitalize your downtown, and you're working with mass development. Well, in Littleton, we too are looking to revitalize our downtown. One of the problems that we have is we don't have the basic infrastructure, so we're actually have to do a sewer first, which is a great opportunity because we've been working with a consultant for a little over a year now on actually creating a smart sewer system, which is a sewer system that's a little bit environmental friendly, where we could reuse the water from it. Also, we would have an anaerobic digester, which would generate, So there's a lot of exciting projects that we have going on there. That's really is the catalyst to downtown revitalization. So that's been great. Also been a facilities person. We don't have a designated facilities person, so I'm working on some of the same things right now. We have a building that was built in 1932. It's not ADA or AAB compliant, and we're having all sorts of issues with our seniors don't have the adequate space. Our town hall, it was the old high school, so it was, like I said, built in 32, had an addition in 55, another addition in renovation in the 80s. So we've got our money's worth out of that building, but it's a challenge, just like the challenge that you're having with, the McKinley School and whatever might be in that situation. I know that we're in that same boat where if you put so much into that building, there's a certain percentage that, it has to be completely brought up to code. And our doorways are not ADA or AAB compliant, our elevators are not compliant, so it's one of those things where we had to look at doing a study to really examine what are our possibilities, because one thing we don't want to do is throw good money after bad. We always said, that movie, The Money Pit. So that's something that you really want to make sure that you really identify all your options before you actually jump into something like that. So these type of projects, I love doing them in Littleton, and to seeing that they were available here in Rockland too, same thing. It just was an exciting opportunity, something that I look forward to hearing more about and being involved in.
So the next one is, why are you exploring a new opportunity? So certainly sounds like you got a passion for the town that you're in with Littleton. So why are you seeking a new opportunity?
One thing that I realized when I first started that certificate program was that, I was ready to start getting to the point where I had an opportunity to be a town administrative, town manager somewhere. So Littleton's was an opportunity that I thought. The administrator left a little bit earlier than we all anticipated. Sometimes when you're an assistant and you work for a municipal, I call them municipal legends, like Bernie or anybody that's been in there for a long time, the select board at that point want to go in a completely different direction and start new. Sometimes they tie the assistant into, well, it's going to be the same status quo. So as much as we try to assure them that it's not, because I certainly have different management styles than my predecessor in Littleton, it didn't work out the way that I would have preferred it to work out. But, I'm passionate about the community that I work in. It's not something that, I really take it as it's like my community, because I'm spending more time in the community we work than actually with the one I live, because I get to just sleep at home Monday through Friday, but the rest of the time I'm in town. So hopefully that answered that.
I have one other follow-up. What do you feel differentiates yourself from the others seeking this position?
When you get to this point where you have finalists, you really have 3 qualified candidates, and each one of us could do the job. There's no doubt in my mind. I think it's about the fit when it comes down to, and it's got to be a fit both ways. So in looking at your community, and I have to say I was really impressed with the screening committee, because I know that you had a difficult 2018, but one thing that I saw this as an opportunity where some people wanted to run from it. I wanted to dive in. And then seeing the screening committee, how committed, enthusiastic, and just the pride that they took in this community, that it just made, I got in my car and I said, I made the right choice in applying here. And I truly believe that I can fit in this community.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Nyman.
Could you give us an example of your management style and ability to motivate town hall staff?
Sure. So, again, I spoke with my predecessor. My management style was totally different. And I'll give you for example. He would have staff meetings where he would sit up in the front and the staff sat in the back. And he would lecture to the department heads for about an hour, and then the meeting would be over. And I was looking around the room when I first went there, and everybody's on their cell phone. Nobody's paying attention. So, out of respect for him, it's his show, and I just knew when I had the opportunity I was going to do it different. And I did get the opportunity in November. So what I did is got out from the front, set up just a round table where we all sat around together, and I went over the items that I needed to go over. But then we had a round-the-room discussion, and it was really great because it stimulated department heads to talk about other people's projects and really take an interest. So it was, and then offer some suggestions. So it was really, really helpful. So, another thing that I do is, my management style is, I get out from behind that desk and in that office, and I like to go around to the departments, sit down at their desk, talk to them, see what's going on, talk to staff, not just department heads, but, clerical staff as well, and let them know who I am and the down-to-earth person that I am. So, and the last thing, what we did is, on opening day, I had opening day. So we had a barbecue for lunch, and we all, right at Town Hall, and we got together, and then we had a TV going on in our community room, which nobody really took advantage of watching the TV, but it was really great to see that the staff was able to police themselves enough that they took turns in making sure that the office was coverage, things that I didn't have to worry about because they knew what the right thing to do is. I also like to really encourage staff to get involved in their associations, as well as professional development. That certificate program that I mentioned, I like to think a pest to the Mass Managers Association and bringing that into Littleton, because Littleton's hosting that, and it's really difficult something to get. So by doing that, too, is I had an opportunity to have a few staff members at a discounted rate. So we were getting something out of that, and this past year, I had one person, our Park and Rec Director, who participated, and, I just sent out a reminder to everybody, because April 30th is the deadline for submitting applications to the Mass Municipal Managers Association, and she replied to all, to my email, and just said it was the greatest experience that she ever had. She encourages staff, and if anybody wants to answer any questions, feel free to do that. So, I made an impact on her that she was able to be re-energized and pass that down to other folks in town. So that's me. If it's a warm day, I said, hey, let's have ice cream, and we'll go get ice cream, and we'll do it in the community room and just take a little break and have an ice cream social. So it's building that morale. And staff really appreciates that. It's something that they didn't have with the last administrator, and they do have, and the respect that they have for me, and it's mutual. It's a two-way respect. So I like to think it's worked, and feel free to contact any of them and ask them for yourselves.
So that was one of my follow-up questions. If we spoke to people who you have supervised in the past, how would they describe you in your management style?
Just what I said. I'm a down-to-earth person. I don't ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So if it's, if the trash is built up in the community room at the police station, we were having a meeting, I'm going to pull the bag out and I'm going to walk it to the dumpster, because our staff is obviously tied up. And so yeah, I think that each one of them would say I'm very supportive. I try to empower them to be better managers and help them get the tools that they need to be better managers.
And then my last question is, how have you included elected officials into the day-to-day operations, into the team that you supervise?
So I contact with the Board of Selectmen a lot. So we probably do, as something comes up, I send an email. If we get something, I send an email. Sometimes I'm thinking, am I sending too many emails because they're going to get buried in an inbox? So, but very often it could be 6 to 10 times a day that I'm passing on information. I think that the selectmen, obviously, as the chief executive officer of the town, have to be notified and have to be aware of what's going on in town. Even the most small mundane things sometimes, I think that could elevate to something larger. I'd like them to be aware. It's the last thing that I want, and I'm sure that the selectmen want, is for you to be outside of this building and somebody tell you something and you're not aware of it.
Right.
It's very frustrating for me, and I'm sure it would be very frustrating for Board of Selectmen. So I try to consider how I would like to be notified, and I try to do the same thing. I miss things from time to time because our emails get jammed, but plus I see our selectmen are very involved in other subcommittees. So at night, Monday through Thursday, I'm usually the last one that locks town hall. So, and one of them are always in there too. So we're always touching base.
Good. I'm all set.
Oh, continuing, I like a lot of other themes that, like you touched on, like from Ms. Nyman, like especially as it relates to the culture here in Town Hall, you're probably very much aware that the events in the past year in town have been challenging, but they've really affected the morale of our employees and our staff here. It's affected the perception of just Rockland residents about, exactly how their town government operates, and really our image, like our branding and how we want to be viewed by the outside world. And thankfully, this opportunity allows us to really start over, to hit the reset button and to begin anew, which is, I think, exciting to all of us. But if you were appointed to the position, like, how would you, what actions would you take to really address those issues, understanding the year or so that we've had, and what would you do when you came in to begin addressing those? And have you had any experiences in where you've been in the past where, I mean, I'll honestly think anything could be like what we dealt with, but have there been any experiences that you built that could help in that regard?
You know, my policy always is an open door. And if a resident has a problem in Littleton, sometimes I'll just get in my car and go right out there and find out what's going on. And then if it's something that, and to give you a little example, something as simple as a new development with mailboxes. They had to have that communal mailbox, and they were just kind of bickering with the developers, where are we going to put this? And the residents were really getting uptight, so I went right out there. I went right out there, I met with the resident, walked around, looked at where we could potentially put it. I had my highway superintendent come down, I had my police and fire chief come down for a quick little meeting. We all agreed on a spot, highway marked it off, we put some marking paint, and that was the site that we decided was acceptable to the developer and to the residents. So I'd like to be out there for them. The same thing if somebody comes into town, you know, if they have any issue, and no issue is a small issue, but my door is just open, and they come in, they'll sit down, and if they just want to talk, if they just want to vent, because sometimes that's what it is, it's just venting. And I'm always willing to listen to residents, because I think when you listen to the residents, sometimes unfortunately, we can't help everybody, and it's tough, and it's a struggle, but you give somebody enough that they're going to appreciate the fact that you're listening and that you're really taking their concerns, and we are, because this is our business. We're public service, you know, and, you know, I take great pride in being a public servant, and so I want the residents to know that I'm available. And, you know, I'll go to various meetings if there's an issue and there's maybe some dispute within a board about a topic, and I'll try to help facilitate. As far as staff, like I said, you know, I mentioned some of the things that I did in our town. We had a situation where, you know, our town administrator was brilliant, but his rapport with staff was probably not as, was different than my approach. So, you know, I identified that, and I tried to bring the staff together with various different events, a Christmas party, just like those socials that I was talking about, and they really go a long way.
Like, as you know, just as a follow-up, I mean, in any town, like the non-elected stakeholders are like most oftentimes more important than even the Board of Selectmen, the people, the influencers, and the people on the finance committees or whatever. It's been really important, especially over the past few months, to make sure we're really rebuilding really good and strong relationships with those stakeholders and frankly anyone that has anything to do with businesses and like any business in Rockland, whether they're a developer, like a future business owner, like anything. How do you view the role of the town administrator in that, and what would you do to help us like increase those relationships and really help us build them even more?
So you have to really be a collaborator. You really have to work with these groups. You have to listen. You have to be a sounding board. You have to be the person that they seek. You know, in Littleton, I go to more meetings than my wife would appreciate me going to. But it's something where I think that's why I have some great respect for the citizens. I really do. I've had residents that wrote letters on my behalf when they wanted me to become the town administrator, and it really was touching for me that they actually did a written letter campaign. Businesses, I take an approach even with businesses too, that they're so important, that, in this community, in Littleton too, is most of the tax burden is on the residents. So when you have a commercial business that's in town or wants to come in town, I roll out the red carpet because we need them. So part of our revitalization of our downtown, Northern Bank was acquiring a bunch of different parcels. And so when I found out that he has 4 acres in our area, I reached out to him and said, Jim, can we get together? We're working on implementing our master plan, and, we have a roadmap, and we have the sewer project, which is getting some favorable votes at town meeting. That I don't know what you're planning, but let's sit down, because the opportunities that could be available to you might be a little different than what you're thinking. So we had that initial meeting, and he sat down with us, and we told him where we were headed, and he left. He came back actually about 2 weeks ago. He reached out to me and said, hey, Anthony, I have some schematic designs that I want to run by you. So I set up a meeting with our chairman of the board, who was able to come during the course of the day, which is great. And he brought back a schematic design that was so impressive. It was what the town wanted. It was to keep that New England village look. So, and it's important to know what the town wants, because you're not going to get something through unless the town folks, you really follow their lead on what they're looking for. And he came back with a plan that is just schematic designs, but wow, he said, how'd I do? I said, well, you hit a home run. And everybody, we had 2 planning board members there, a master plan implementation committee, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and we were just really thrilled. But that's that extending that olive branch. That's going out there and not waiting for opportunities to come to us, but it's creating opportunities. And that's what I like to do. I just don't want to wait for something to come to us. I want to go get it, and whether that be grants. I worked on that MassWorks. We had a $1.5 million MassWorks grant that won, but the sewer project, green communities, and even having that relationship there at the state level with the different folks, it's important to reach out to them and to be on their radar screen. Fortunately, the Deputy Commissioner of Local Services is somebody that I worked with at Brookline, so it's nice to have that him on that I can text him. But those things are important for the community, and we've been really successful to be on the front lines of receiving some of those grants. Even with the housing, where our housing stock is 12.9, I know yours is lower, but by being a housing choice community, we got a capital grant that I wrote for $250,000 that we were going to have to buy for SCBA for the fire department. We ended up getting it part of the grant. So it was, it's just really creating those opportunities.
One final question in this aspect. You probably obviously asked. I'm very familiar with the push and pull between the so-called town side and the school departments, whether it's relating to budget, any type of processes, or whatever. I mean, it's just inherent in the business. And how do you balance that? I mean, obviously, many communities have different ways of balancing it. Some they end up with a very good harmonious relationship, and then other communities it's a very tenuous relationship. How do you?
So, again, my approach is we're all one team in Littleton, so I have a fantastic relationship with our superintendent, with our chairman of our school committee, because, like Rockland, education is very important to the community. So, but we also have to live within, the frameworks of Proposition 2.5, and there's only so much funds available. So by really working with the superintendent and having the relationship I do, that very, very frequently we just sit down in his office and have coffee, and we talk about, this is the budget this is what we're looking at. Is there any way that you can help out? You know, we had a gap of $140,000 this year. And, you know, I just went to the superintendent and said, is there anything else you can do? I hate to ask you, I know, but we're really at a standstill. And, you know, so anything. So he did. You know, the school committee, they came back and threw $70,000 more on the table. You know, and every little bit counts and helps. So, but having those relationships and knowing that you're going to work with them and vice versa, it really is. It makes for a smooth operation. You know, so we respect that. You know, at times we can't do everything that we want to do.
Understood.
But we have that mutual respect enough for each other.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
So Mike touched on 2018 in Rockland. One of the things that I think came out of that was that you have a really hands-on Board of Selectmen. Can you describe what you envision the relationship with the Rockland Board of Selectmen to be?
You know, I think that it's so important that the selectmen set the goals of which way the community is going to be in. You know, it's ultimately you folks that are out there living in this community 24/7, 365. You know what's best for the community. You know what the community wants. So to have that guidance by the board is going to be very important. And something that I would have liked to see more, even with Littleton, is the opportunity to sit down on a one-on-one with each of the selectmen and really carve out time. A lot of the times, like I mentioned, that
Careful what you ask.
I know. It's a
We'll
good
get that
point.
here.
But you know, it's sometimes we run each other into in different meetings. You know, we want to talk about something and we just don't have the time. So it's nice to be able to carve out some time, especially with the chairman too, as the chairman's really directs at least in Littleton, the agenda and which way we're going. So to have that opportunity to sit down with the chairman, whether it be, I don't want to say weekly now, but every 2 weeks, monthly, just to kind of understand what's going on and what the direction that we should be going in. But, you know, with the master plan, I know that's going to be a 2-year process, but that's hopefully going to lay the roadmap and the way Rockland will be. And I'm sure that the selectmen will be committed to implementing some of those areas in the master plan to move forward Rockland.
How would you seek to establish clear direction and setting goals and objectives?
So we do a couple of things which I think are very effective. We had a retreat for the selectmen and the town administrator and the staff, and where we posted as a meeting outside of the building where we had an opportunity to, and nobody came, but if somebody wanted to come, they were more than welcome to come. But we brought in some dinner, we sat down, and we were able to speak freely about different board business. I thought that was very effective. Another thing that we do is with the goals we send out, we solicit each selectman to give us what their goals are, and then we put them on a matrix where we then, and some of the goals will be shared by various selectmen, housing, I'm sure, the concerns there, and we then identify those as being goals, and then we also put staff responsible for helping to achieve the goals. And some of those goals are long-term. You know, we're not going to achieve them in 1 year, but they have to be out there out front. And even if it's a year-on-year item that just keeps popping up, we're making some progress because it takes time to do things in government. Sometimes longer than probably we all wish, but it's just the way it is.
Imagine a scenario where the Board of Selectmen is taking a position or moving in a direction that you believe would not benefit the town. How would you handle this, and have you encountered this in your past positions?
You know, I have, absolutely. You know, I believe it's my responsibility to present options to the Board of Selectmen. So I never want to give you one thing and say, this is what we have to do. That's not right. But, you know, here's your menu that you get to choose from. Now, I may prefer this, but ultimately, it's the selectmen that decide the course of action. So, and that happens, and sometimes it's the decision was made, it's not something that I would have went with, but you know what? It's still going to get us there. It just gets us there a different way.
You sort of stole a little bit of my thunder, but policies in themselves, each department has their own set of policies, police, fire, and the town halls, the schools, everybody sort of has a little bit different. Again, when you go through, pick them all out, let us know which ones are less perfect. You know, we have a town charter that's, goes back to shortly after the Pilgrims came, and it really doesn't address the needs of our town today. You know, I would never, in '96 when I came here, this was a family-run town. Quite frankly, I couldn't say boo to anyone because of that. But so how do you deal with that issue? You know, of I don't know, the friends, the policies, public safety. You know, a lot of different. You know, how are you going to deal with that? I mean, it says, you know, I got a question that says, can you tell us any policy that you've ever done or implemented that worked and what you did? But, you know, we're all going to have all these policies already, and we want to know how we're going to work with you to get to modernize our the things that we're doing. You know, we want to get, we're a regional town now. We want to get into the modern era in our approach to everything, and I think this board has done that, and we need someone that's going to go along with us.
So annually, part of our process too is we actually review all of the town policies. So we go through and we identify areas that we feel may need to be addressed. We make some notations. We'll go over it in a board meeting. Again, it's almost part of that goal setting too. So, you know, we also, you know, a reason why I encourage department heads and even myself to be involved in these professional associations, because you go and get best practices from other communities. People aren't reinventing the wheel. You know, we're stealing it from another community, you know, a community that's doing it better. So, you know, I'm working right now on some of our policies that are not that good, and we've had some issues with them, and I'm asking around and want to see who else is doing something different and reviewing them, you know, and you know, and even getting an array of different policies and maybe taking some bits from each section and then presenting the policy to the Board of Selectmen to adopt. One thing you mentioned, public safety, that is my strongest point, where being in Brookline, I got to run the operations for all the administrative functions for both police and fire. So we had, together, it was over $30 million just in their budgets. So those are two areas where I like to consider myself really strong knowledge of. I have a really good understanding of both police and fire and how they work. One thing that Littleton just achieved is being an accredited police department, which goes a long way. Our fire department, we just finished building our new fire station, and I know that that's another project that you're working on. So that was, it's actually a lot of fun to do that. I had a good time working on that. It wasn't easy, and we differ at times, but I strayed a little bit off course, but identifying some of those policies, even within the police department and really your fire department, and asking, you know, is this what other communities do? And communities are great at sharing. You know, it's part of our annual review is to go through every policy, so we don't get to that situation where we have a policy that's been around a long time that A, we don't follow, and B, it's antiquated. You know, we couldn't follow it. So we don't want to get into that situation, but, you know, sometimes we don't have a plethora of staff, so things do kind of fall by the wayside. But, it's important to review them. Even making a little bit of progress each year is, to me, is progress.
Thank you. Mr. Penny?
So I'm going to touch on finance a little bit and then talk a little bit, or ask about the master plan and the town charter. First, what have been your responsibilities regarding the preparation of the annual town budgets, operating capital, enterprise funds, override requests, those types of things?
So in my current job, we're involved with all of those areas. We work with departments on reviewing their budgets, validating some of the requests that they have, challenging them at times that, you know, geez, you're asked for $20,000 more for services, but you didn't spend the service budget we gave you last year, so do we really need it, or can we take it from somewhere else? And, you know, I think having a good knowledge of the budgets are important. We put together the capital improvement plan. We're just involved from the get-go with the budgets. So, obviously in Brookline, I had to do it from a different level because I had to dive into the weeds and really start with personnel and build back up. So they have a pretty extensive, I like to think, extensive background with finances.
So it's one area of strength that we're looking for. How would you describe your fiscal philosophy, and how can you give any examples that illustrate this philosophy?
Fiscally conservative. I think it's important that we budget conservatively and not put ourselves into a situation that's not sustainable. So that's the way that we've always done it. That's the way that I've always done it, even in my past job, that always go on the conservative side.
Okay. What's your experience with OPEB? Because like most other communities, it is a challenge that we face.
It is a challenge, and I know that the new rules is that that's going to be on our balance sheets. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's something that we really want to have a funding schedule and stick to it, a plan. You know, and I was reading an article about the Leominster mayor, how 35 years ago they set off on a plan to fund their OPEB, and he's fully funded it. It's
like one of the only.
It's amazing, you know. But that's the point is having a plan and then sticking to that plan is going to be important. A lot of communities, we don't, for whatever reason, but kudos to them, and I think that if we did something like that and we had a plan, and we stick to that plan, I think that we too could achieve those goals.
The last part, as Chairman Ryan had alluded to, and you as yourself, we are embarking on a master plan and a town charter, because both of which are older and probably not relevant. So what experience have you had working on and with master plans and updating and changing a town charter?
Well, I will say Littleton's plan was completed when I got there, so what I've been involved in is the implementation of that master plan. As far as town charter, Littleton doesn't have a town charter. I know that was asked of me with the screening committee and my thoughts. I know that you have a lot of different elected positions in town. And it's probably a good time to look at it. You know, part of the governor's office is talking about a Modern Muni Act 2, and part of that is to eliminate things like an elected treasurer. Not to say that your treasurer, you know, it's just you want to get the best and the brightest people for Rockland.
Right.
And not saying that they don't live within the borders, but you sometimes could limit yourself to that. So there's if the governor's office is making that a point, then it's really something that I think that it's the days of all those elected positions, probably, like you said earlier, it's been something that's been around a long time, that's it's something to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kara?
What has your experience been in managing personnel and following a personnel system?
So, I have a lot of experience in personnel. One of the things that I was faced with just 2 weeks into being the interim in Littleton, and I'll share what I can share without crossing over, but we had a police officer that refused we have a drug testing, random drug policy, and he refused. And so I was at the gym, and the police chief calls me at 7:30 and says, have a problem. I says, what's the problem? He says, somebody refused to test this morning. I says, okay. I said, so, tell you what, meet me in my office in an hour, and we'll go through it. So, what we did is we acted swiftly. We put him on paid administrative leave. We took his service weapon, we took his ID, we took all town property, including a cruiser, so we sent people by to go get it. The person realized that it probably wasn't the smartest thing that he was doing, so he said, well, I'll go and take a drug test at a local hospital. It's too late. It's too late. You have to take it when we tell you to take it. It's not you take it on your own terms, it's our terms.
Right.
So, he still did that, and he was apologetic for the rest of the day. The phone just didn't stop. And he made a bad decision, and what we did is, after we ended up just suspending him for a week, and suspended without pay, and we moved on. It was a bad choice, and sometimes people make bad choices for whatever reason. I'm the type of person that I don't like to cut off the head, and just, I like to give somebody, I want to understand what caused them to, what was the reasoning behind his decision not to take it. And he brought up about, he questioned how that the medical company that we service with, and how that selection process worked. It's valid. I think it's every once in a while, I think we need to explain to the staff on how that works and what the selection is. So, but that wasn't the right way to do it. We moved ahead, but that was week 2. So, I'll act with something, I'll like to deal with it swiftly. And unfortunately, I've had to deal with a couple of situations too that, and even with the board, a volunteer board person who went into our director, a COA director, and was calling her all sorts of names in the hallway. And, we couldn't have that. So, I had to have that difficult discussion with a board member and say, well, there's a couple of options here. You can resign, or you can have a hearing before the Board of Selectmen, So she ended up resigning, which I think was the best choice for everybody, because we didn't want to go through that process of having that hearing, because she was wrong, and we had plenty of witnesses, and we cannot have our staff be treated like that. We just can't. We don't ask our staff, we require our staff not to treat people like that, and nor should they be treated with disrespect.
Would you say these instances are the most challenging situations you've had to deal with?
It's challenging. When you're telling a police officer, give me your gun and badge and ID and everything, it's a challenge, but it's one at the end, we actually had the union grabbed the chief and I and really said, thank you for the way you guys handled it. You handled it swiftly. Under the prior town administrator, he may have let that drag on. I don't like to let things drag on. I really like to take care of things right away. So, and they were really appreciative of that. So, it's a challenge, though. It's a challenge. You never want to hurt, somebody. You never, these are people's livelihoods, and it's something I don't take lightly. And, and really working together at it is the way that we've been successful.
So on the hiring end, what do you look for when you're choosing new employees, especially department heads?
You know, it really comes down to fit. You know, I've had to hire a couple different department heads so far. One was a COA, Director Elder and Human Services, and we had a bunch of applicants, and when we sat with them and you listen to them, and they all have the experience that can do it. And it came down to, and some have more experience than others, but what's the fit? Can that person fit in with the rest of the managers and with the community? Even if they didn't have some of the skills that we really would have preferred, I think that if they were, we could work with that. Now that was our responsibility to give them the professional development to make them into that person we need. But to find somebody that really can gel with the community, to me, was so important.
I'm good.
Michael?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's number 8? Oh, no, Mike, is it?
Just do.
You can do one.
Just do number 9 and I'll go.
That's all right.
During interviews, I always do that. We ask around and we forget to mark who asked what question. We go, did we ask 7?
We'll have to
No, we
find
have
the
them all assigned.
That's awful.
We knew ahead of time.
One of the things, like you mentioned at the outset, is like your experience like in economic development and how you understand, like and appreciate our work to revitalize, like our Union Street corridor right here, but also just to like really promote economic development opportunities in general, especially with one of the things that you probably read right down the street. We have Union Point, which is a whole bottle of wax. And it's going to remain that, I think, but also the opportunities and the promise that whole development has, I think, in the long term is really exciting. It's exciting, I think, on a regional level. It's also exciting on, frankly, a town revenue level as well. The promise that hopefully a full build-out will represent like our revenues also. But how do you... understanding that and understanding our goals relative to just our downtown corridor to how, two things. Can you talk about your experiences, and I apologize, you already have a little bit, but, and also how, when you're working to attract businesses and to retain them, how you make sure they fit, and how you make sure the character blends together what you know the community will accept, what they'll fight against, and how to make it all work so there's not World War III basically at town meeting.
It's a challenge because you really would love to say and go out there and knock on all the commercial doors and talk to them and find out, but you just don't have the time, and that's really difficult for us. So, but what you have to do is listen to the community, because the community will also tell you what their experiences are with businesses and what they see as some of the obstacles that a business may be going to. So it's not just reaching out to the businesses, it's reaching out to the community. It's working together. So with Union Point, I know that the other two communities, it's going to be important to build and work together to make, I think that from what I was reading, there was some challenges there, but great opportunity, great opportunity, and it's a great potential source of commercial, what did I see, 2 million square feet of potential within the Rockland borders. That's great, and that's something that it's really important to harness that. So one of the things that we did is, we like to, looking for the right word, harass our state, like Jay Ash, when Jay Ash was the Secretary of, he's fantastic. So what we did is we had him out, and we wanted to talk about some of the projects that we were going on in town and what the state could do to help us. So we had a nice spread with a local business that just moved into town who is a big fan of mine, because when he first walked in and didn't know where to start, I sat him, brought him into my office, made sure that I had all those contacts that he needed with the building department and with the town clerk and anybody else that he needed to open his doors. We ended up giving him the business to help him out, and it didn't hurt that he didn't make fraps, but I had Jay Ash a frap done, so Jay was definitely appreciative. But, you know, did that help us get $1.5 million? Absolutely. Absolutely. Did that help us with, you know, getting a $250,000 capital planning grant? Absolutely, because they saw that the commitment that we were making in these projects and what the work that we were trying to do, that they believed that it was worth investing in us. And I think that that's going to be important, you know, even on the state level and even the federal level, to let them know that we have a lot of things going on and we really need your help. And we're not just looking for our handout, but we're looking for support, because this is what we're bringing to the table.
That's all I have.
So Rockland's currently in the final phase of a significant roads project. We recently constructed a new middle school. We have future capital improvement projects that may include a new fire station, upgrades to the water treatment facility, expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, a new renovated elementary school building, and the community center. Tell us about any large municipal projects that you've managed in your past roles. And I'll add to that, does anything stand out to you from the learning experiences you gained through managing these projects?
So I mentioned you know, I don't like to say that I manage any projects, because we're a team. So we do it all together. And it's important, because one person that's a pretty large project. So I talked about our sewer. You know, we have a sewer team he's my highway department director. He's involved in that. We work very closely on that. We're also working on we have an $8 million new water treatment facility that we're proposing at town meeting next month. But that's, you know, my involvement is supporting the light and water. We have light and water that handles that. It's supporting him to make him, to have him have the tools that he needs to get that project done. Facilities, you know, our schools, again, it's working with the superintendent and the school committee on school projects. And for instance, you know, kind of thinking ahead in long term, so one of our schools, the last school, is the Shaker Lane Elementary School. It's probably the next one that would need to be rehabbed. So what we would do in the sewer, I said, you know what, let's branch off from the sewer a little bit. Let's check the feasibility of what their system is, because we're also realize that we may have to expand that school. So for a little bit of money, then we were able to realize that it doesn't look like that system can handle an expansion of that school. So fine. So what we did is say, okay, well, let's run the pipe down to close to the school so they can tie into our sewer system later. Because that probably is 6-7 years down the road before we're able to take on that project. But, you know, I like to give myself a little tap on the back for thinking of that, because had we not thought of that and the sewer was already in and the pipe's not there, then it was either build a new treatment facility for that site, or, you know, really ripping up a road that maybe was just done to lay sewer. So trying to think. Right now, I'm coordinating our facilities, like I said. So we did the building needs assessment, and that involves all of our facilities. Because one thing, when you start talking about facilities, we said, geez, maybe we should look at everything and just kind of holistically see where everything fits on a timeline for either rehabbing, new. Can we rehab? You know, space is getting tight. We have people working in closets because, like you said, these buildings were built, you know, your fire station was, what, 1935 or something? And with the addition, expansion in the 70s. So, and it's, you know, fire service and the way we do things just change. And all of a sudden, we just need space. So I'm looking at that again from that larger view. And then it'll be up to the town, because everything is a dollar amount, what we can afford to do. But it's nice to know that town, here is our options, this is what we have to do. We can phase it, and what's the plan? You know, whatever the town chooses and what gets addressed first, but at least they know everything that has to be addressed in the dollar amount today's and what it will be when we do address it.
So I was going to touch on housing, and obviously Littleton's over their allotment, so Rockland is not. So we face issues related to affordable housing, including management of 40B developments. We also have a 40R district. Opportunities for entry level and senior housing is always a challenge. What has been your experience in managing this complex issue, including how you make sure that the projects blend into the community and meet the local needs?
Big challenge. It's not, it's all communities in Massachusetts that deal with that. You know, it's really difficult because, like Rockland, we have seniors that built this community, and all of a sudden they're getting priced out and they can't afford to stay. You know, that to me is, it's so sad, you know, that these are the people that made the community what it is. It's not easy. You know, we've done different zoning to include inclusionary zoning. We did a senior residential development bylaw, which we required, I think we're up to 20% as an affordability component. You talk about 40R, and the 40R could be a great opportunity for your downtown redevelopment. We have Littleton, we have a beautiful, fairly new commuter rail station, and we have large parcel of land. I think it's 20-something acres, which is, we're right now going through 40R, throwing that idea. We did a visionary event with our citizens to see what's tolerable for them, because that's a great opportunity when you have that you can put, you know, some apartments and some housing and some commercial right near a commuter rail station. You know, it would be a great opportunity. But again, it's working with the community. Those visioning events are really important.
Okay, I'm going to,
Okay.
since we're getting near the end here, I'm going to, do you have any questions for us?
You know what, I don't. I've done my research, so I'd like to.
You seem to know a little bit about us anyway. I can hear it in the conversation that you gave, that you did your homework and that you know, it's always good to see when you're the teacher. You know, you didn't come in and say the dog ate my homework. So anyway, we appreciate you coming down here. We appreciate your candidate, and we're going to listen to the next two fellas, and we'll probably not going to make a decision until our next meeting.
That's fine.
That'll give us time to ask any further questions. Anybody wants to do any further research, they can call your mother up or somebody.
Absolutely.
And they'll ask them if you were a good boy.
Well, I don't know. She may say at times no.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It
Nice
was
to
a
meet you.
pleasure.
Anthony, thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
All right.
Stuff.
Thanks so much. Good to meet you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
really, thank you very much. Yep.
Anthony, thank you. Does anyone want to water?
All right. Yeah.
Do you want?
Anybody need to take a break or anything?
No, I just.
Okay. Next row, Michael Gallagher. He's coming. Yeah, we just, you know.
Drawing out a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, we is. That's you.
Do you need one, Mike?
Oh, no.
Well, here.
No,
We
yeah.
go to the next one just in case.
Yeah, thank you.
Should we give one to the
I think we're
candidate?
here. I think we're here for a while. So
Do we give one to the candidate?
that's a good
question.
We can do that.
All right, look at Kara.
Look at me.
Oh, we're still on video.
Here, we introduce Michael Gallagher. You get to sit right here. How you doing?
How are you?
Hi. Nice to
Larry
meet you.
Ryan.
Michael, Rich Penny. Michael, nice to meet you.
Welcome, Mike. We've been checking you out for a while, and you've been vetted, and everybody's done their job. And now we have a few questions that the board's going to pose to you. And I'm going to start off with Mr. Penny on the end. And
Thank you.
On we go.
So, Michael, thank you for showing the interest in our community. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell us, would you like to take a few minutes to tell us about your specific interest in, qualifications for in this position?
Sure, thank you very much. And as you've been checking me out, I've been checking you out too. I've, excuse me, actually had an opportunity to attend a couple of your, well, one of your meetings here, and also your recent town meeting, your special town meeting, when you were doing some, excuse me, some money transfers.
Tell you what's familiar.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've been stalking. It's one of those things.
So you're working.
Before I start, I just want to thank the screening committee for giving me an opportunity to come here this evening. I know how tough that is. I've been on screening committees myself on a couple of superintendent searches, one in North Attleboro, one in Weymouth, so I know the work that's put into that. So I'd like to commend your screening committee. I know how tough that is, and I want to thank them for giving me an opportunity to be here to see you this evening. My interest in Rockland was piqued when I was kind of watching some of the things that were going on, and unfortunately, it's you know, there's been some headlines and some things that have transpired, and I started thinking about my qualifications, what I know of the area, what I know of the community, and thought that there would be a good fit for me to be able to come in and help Rockland navigate some of these challenges that you have going on currently, and that you've seemed to have beginning to overcome now, which is really good to see. It's a very strong community. Rockland's been, you know, I've lived in the area for almost 40 years now, and you know, I know a lot about the town, so it piqued my curiosity. I've been town administrator in North Attleboro now for almost 3.5 years. I went to North Attleboro when an opportunity arose there at the end of Sue Kay's administration. I had been the Director of Administrative Services in North Attleboro prior to, in Weymouth prior to, and functioned as Deputy to the Mayor, Chief of Staff, and wore a bunch of different hats. We had some issues going in that we had to deal with as far as financial was concerned, and as a result, I was able to help the town and help the mayor out through all of that. But as far as my qualifications, as I said, I've been in North Attleboro now for 3.5 years. I've had a number of successes within the town, things I've been able to bring to the table. I've got, you know, a lot of years in the private sector as well as the public sector. I served 13 years also on the school committee in Weymouth while I was working in the private sector. So I've got a good feel for how government works and how things operate. And I think that background, coupled with what I've learned in Weymouth and in North Attleboro, I think I bring a lot to the table. A very unique skill set that you're probably not going to find in too many people, just based on the things that I've done. You know, I was in IT for quite some time. This is actually my third career. I started off doing accounting in the private sector, then I did IT, and I was lured into the public sector by Mayor Kay when she was elected in Weymouth, and here I am, years later, doing this. I don't know, I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. So the other question is, why are you exploring a new opportunity? Obviously, town administrator in North Attleboro, larger town, larger budget than, you know, a small community such as Rockland. So, you know, really interested on why are you exploring a new opportunity?
So, as I mentioned, I was watching what was transpiring here, and I thought that I could really do some good here in Rockland. I think I've done quite a bit in North Attleboro, and I think I bring some things to the table here that you could use as a community and where I could actually make a difference for you and help the town of Rockland get through some of the things that you're going to need to go through in the next few months, and try to settle some things down and get the right people in place and comfortable and moving forward. I'll bring that synergy within the town hall. I think one of the skill sets that I have that I think is very beneficial is the fact that I can build teams. I have a really great team in North Attleboro, and I will tell you the thing that I will miss most in North Attleboro is my department heads. I have a tremendous group of department heads that work with me. We collaborate on things. They're a fine bunch of people. They're my go-to when I need information. If I need to vent, they'll listen, and vice versa. My door is always open, and they know that they can come in and what we say behind closed doors stays behind closed doors, and it's a good group. So I think I can bring that synergy and the collaboration and morale boost to the community.
Just one last. What do you feel differentiates yourself from the other candidates seeking this position?
I think as I mentioned, I have a very unique skill set that started in the private sector and has been transferred now into the public sector. I've also been a sitting town manager for a town administrator. Sorry, I just gave myself a promotion. Sitting town administrator now for 3.5 years, and prior to that, in my role with Mayor Kay in Weymouth, I was involved in everything day to day, the entire operation of the town. I've negotiated collective bargaining agreements on the school committee, in Weymouth, in North Attleboro. In fact, I'm right in the middle of doing that right now in North Attleboro, trying to negotiate another set of CBAs. I've got 2 settled and 5 in the works. I've done a little bit of everything. I've been through a number of different things that have happened, excuse me, within both communities, and been able to navigate through those things. I will tell you it was a little bit of a learning curve, going from a mayoral form of government to a town administrator role. And I needed to learn that the selectmen were part of my collaborative group there, as opposed to a council, which is a little bit different. It's a different feel. And I think getting through that has been helpful. But I think those are the things that differentiate me at this point. You know, the years years that I've had in the private sector. I'm also an IT guy. I'm a bit flicker from way back. I have my little propeller beanie at home, and you know, I enjoy it, and I love to utilize that skill set and leverage technology to make businesses, town of Rockland being a business, run more efficiently and effectively. I mean, I've got a couple of projects we're doing right now. One to do online permitting, and another one that's sitting in the wings to do a voice over IP system for the entire enterprise, which is inclusive of the schools.
Thank you.
Could you give us examples of your management style and your ability to motivate staff within the town hall?
Sure. My management style is I'm very hands-off when it comes to management. I'm going to be there if somebody needs me, if they need to reach out, need some direction. I do not micromanage. It's not my style. My thought process there is, if I have to micromanage you, I've got the wrong person there. So I need to then make a change. But I think it's a collaborative style. I love to invite people into the process and have discussions regarding what it is we're trying to accomplish, and try to bring people together to try to get to a solution to a problem.
I know you spoke highly of the staff and department heads where you currently work.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build that type of management staff and department heads?
I was fortunate that they were there,
They were there.
when I got there, although I have hired a couple,
Mm-hmm.
and they have fit right in with the group. I tend to be, a long time ago, I had a manager who I worked for who told me that if he saw me in my office, he'd throw me out. He said, get out there and wander around and find out what's going on. So he was a really phenomenal mentor, and taught me how to do management by wandering around. So I'll have a tendency to just drop in on people. The other day I was out and about, I texted the police chief to see if he was around, and I just stopped in and had a conversation with he and his captain, and we just sat there for about, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes, just talking about different things that were going on in the community, in his department. I gave him some insight into things that are going on from a budgetary perspective that he didn't really necessarily know prior. Those types of things. I'll do that periodically. I've done it to the fire chief, to the DPW director. It's just, you know, I'll text before I show up, but I'm just going to drop in and say hello sometimes, and just wander around and talk to the staff.
Right.
I mean, early on when I was there, I spent some time in the fire department and chatted with a few people there. Just, I was driving by, they were outside. I stopped and wandered in and had a conversation with a few folks that worked there. So that's the way I operate, and try to bring people together. When we do our budget process and our capital process, it's a collaborative event. I also hold department head meetings fairly regularly. In fact, I have one scheduled Wednesday of this week, just to bring people together and talk about the things that are going on in their departments, and then try to get everybody to work together and talk to each other.
Mr. Mullen, are you done? I'm sorry.
Just one more question.
ahead.
How have you included elected officials into the day-to-day operations in the team where you currently work?
So I meet every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 7 o'clock with the chairman and the vice chairman of the Board of Selectmen. We meet twice a week
Wow.
before they go off to work. And we talk about some of the things that are going on. I also make sure that I keep the rest of the board in the loop via email, text messages. If I know something is happening and it's an emergency or a situation that somebody could hear about, I try to text it out. I have everybody's contact information, and I use technology to do that. And then if I need to, I will call folks and have conversations with them. You know, we do packets every Tuesday and Thursday. We meet on Thursday nights, which is kind of an odd evening to do that, but we do packets every Tuesday and Thursday to make sure that people are, that the rest of the board is included in that. I've attended some of the different meetings. In fact, last Tuesday I was at a Conservation Commission meeting asking for the Concom to allow me to outsource the lifeguards at our beaches. We have 2 ponds and a couple of beaches, and we had a drowning last year. It was tragic. A 19-year-old gentleman drowned in one of our ponds. We don't want that to happen again. So I had worked with the YMCA, local Y, to get a quote to actually provide our lifeguard services for the town, and I went to Concom to ask for that. But again, I'll periodically drop in and sit in on various meetings with the various boards to just keep them in the loop on what's going on also.
Mr. Mullen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Like you mentioned earlier, Mr. Gallagher, that you're very much aware of what we've been through and the implications that like in the ripple effects that's had on our employees and their morale,
Sure.
other challenges that's caused for them, just with our own citizens, being able to trust and believe, frankly, in their own government, and how Rockland is really viewed and looks to the outside world as a result of the craziness we've been through. And one of the things that I'm so excited about this whole process is now we have an opportunity to really hit the reset button, to build on our accomplishments where we have accomplishments, and then really to reset all the negative, all the bad, and to move forward. And like if you were appointed to this position, especially based on what you've seen and experienced, especially from the town meeting, what would be some of the first steps you would take, whether with employees or residents, to try to reinstill? And I think we've done a good job, frankly, already, but how would you really help bring that to the next level?
So I want to just tune in on something that you've done a great job, and I think your town meeting, your special town meeting that you held, was an example of that. There were 400 plus people there. It was nice to see that kind of a turnout, particularly for an open town meeting, so kudos to all of you for being able to do that. As far as I'm concerned, you know, if I were given this opportunity, I'd spend a lot of time talking with the staff and meeting with the folks that work here, the people that have the boots on the ground every day, and try to get them comfortable with the fact that we are moving forward, and try to take that message that you've crafted as part of your your theme and what this board is trying to do, and just instill that in the operations of the town, and spend as much time as I could talking with the folks that work here and getting them to know me and getting them comfortable with me and who I am, so that they know that, you know, what I bring to the table is what you see. I'm not, you know, I have no hidden agenda here. I'm here to help and do what I can for the community. Same with the residents. You know, my thing there would be to attend as many events as I could and meet as many people within the town as I can. That's actually one of the things that I have issues with where I am now. It's very difficult to get there for an hour-long event on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning, because it takes me 2 hours to get down there and back again. I live right around the corner, so it's easier to get here. And I think being visible and being there and meeting people and getting them to know who I am and understand that I'm, it's no nonsense. We're here to do a job, and let's, let's have fun while we do it, but let's do it right.
Like I mentioned, the employee challenges. I mean,
Yep.
like, and a lot of those challenges have all been borne by department heads, but
Sure.
like as you would expect, like our frontline staff, many of our frontline staff has, there's been anxiety, there's been angst, there's been a whole bunch of things. And how would you, also like beyond the department heads, how would you really reach down? How would you seek to help empower frontline staff just working their way up, to really make sure they were included and empowered and mentored in this whole process?
I think that's part of what I was talking about, is actually wandering around and talking to people. I mean, I don't just wander into departments and talk to department heads. I'll talk to the folks that work there too, because they're the people that do this stuff day in, day out. They're the people that are dealing with the public and the reaction, and they've got the people coming up to the window and talking with them about various things. So those are the folks that you want to talk to all the time. We're all human. We're all here to do a job and try to do it as best we can. And if you treat people with respect, you'll get respect. And I think if you talk with folks and let them know that they are empowered to do what they need to do, and that you're there behind them. I think one of the things that's difficult in any job is the unknown of whether or not you've got the backing and that somebody has your back, and you're not out there on a limb all by yourself. And I think that's something you need to instill in folks, that, look, if you make a mistake, that's cool. We'll fix it as long as it's not, a bad mistake. But, we're here. We're all here to do a job.
Thank you. Like, and one last question on this aspect. Like, I'm sure from your school committee experience, that the relationship between the town side and the school side, as much as everyone wants it to be all harmonious, or sometimes, there is a push and pull, and between both sides. How have you dealt with that in the past? Your experiences, how do you handle the more positive times and the more challenging times as well?
I think by being honest with everybody is the way you operate. I have a very, very good relationship with the superintendent of schools. He is one of my confidants, and he and I have worked through some difficult issues and some good times too. We just had a Proposition 2.5 override passed. We were one of the few communities that were able to do that, and I think a lot of that had to do with how transparent and open we are, how we all do work together, and we work together as a collaborative group. And it's the type of environment that we've instilled there. But I have conversations with these folks that are not just about work. I have a relationship with the superintendent of schools that goes beyond just the day-to-day types of things. He'll call me every now and then and do I just need to vent. Can you listen to me for a while? We've gone out to lunch a couple of times just to get away, to kind of decompress a little bit. So those are the kinds of relationships that I try to establish with the folks and try to bridge that. And I know there's always, it's never going to be super harmonious. There's always those bumps in the road. In fact, I have one going on right now where the House Ways and Means budget gave me a $140,000 swing in my calculations and what I had used for revenue calculations. So I had a tough conversation with the superintendent the other day. So he and I are trying to work together to try to figure out if we can plug that gap in a couple of things that we were going to do for the schools above and beyond what we would normally do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So as Selectman Mullen alluded to, 2018 in Rockland was somewhat difficult. But one of the things that came out of it was a very active Board of Selectmen, not just the chairman and the vice chairman, but really the entire board has become very hands-on. You described it a little bit, but can you describe the relationship that you envision for working with the Rockland Board of Selectmen?
Sure. I think, as I mentioned, the best way to work with your board is to keep them informed on everything that's going on. I do information bulletins to the Board of Selectmen that kind of lists something that Bob West, when he was the superintendent of schools in Weymouth, taught me when I was when I was chairman of the Board of Selectmen, chairman of the school committee. So I've been on both sides of that. So I've been one of 7. I've also been, the chair, I've been the vice chair. And I know that there are some things that you're privy to in one role, you may not be in another, but I try to keep everybody informed. I may inform the chairman at the onset that this is going on, and I will ask whether or not he wants to relay that to the rest of the board, or if he wants me to. I always give the chairman that option because out of respect for the role. And but I always make sure that the rest of the board is aware. And if I'm not doing it through an information bulletin, I'm there at the meeting, and I have a section within the agenda every week that's information that is not necessarily something that the selectmen have to act on. I just bring them up to speed on what's transpiring within the community.
How would you seek to establish clear direction, setting goals and objectives?
I think that's working with the board. It's a top-down approach. Anytime you set goals and objectives, it's okay, what's the goals and objectives of the board? You set yours, and then I'll set mine accordingly to make sure that we're in harmony and we're in concert, and then that just trickles down through the rest of the organization. So I would work with the board to try to set those and get direction.
So imagine a scenario where the Board of Selectmen is taking a position or moving in a direction that you believe does not benefit the town. How would you handle this, and have you encountered this type of situation in the past?
I really haven't encountered that situation in the past. I think that's an open and honest discussion that we all need to have. And if I see something that could potentially be harmful to the community, it's my job to make sure that I point that out. You may not want to hear what I have to say, but I'm always going to tell you the truth. And whether that hurts or not, it's my job is to make sure that you do your job and that we don't step on any landmines as a community.
I'm going to vary from my questions and ask you a specific question that's specific to you.
Sure.
Have you been on the Mayor Headland's administration?
Not Mayor Headland.
No?
Mayor Kay.
Oh, Mayor
It's Mayor
Kay, then,
Kay.
okay. So how do you think that relationship with the town of Weymouth will vary your decisions on what happens at the airbase?
What happens at the airbase is there's an old saying that a rising tide raises all boats. Whatever happens there is going to benefit the entire region, not just one community. And as far as, my job, if you were to hire me, my job and my first responsibility is here, to my job. Whatever happens beyond that. I'm not going to put something in jeopardy for the town of Rockland for my own personal gain. That's not how I
Well,
operate.
I ask you that only because it will come up.
No, that's fine.
So
That's
that,
fine.
you can have answered it to people's satisfaction, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, he's also, looking at his resume, he's had some dealings with Southfield and
Oh,
helped
yeah.
actually develop the new DDP over there.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yep. No, I understand. And
That's
I understand.
That's an
that-
ongoing issue that
Oh,
looks like it's a long way from being solved.
yeah.
I was at the first meeting some 25 years ago, whatever it was,
Yep.
and it really hasn't changed a real lot since then.
No, it's
Policy, let
actually
me just run a
sad.
quick policy thing.
Yeah.
How do you deal with policies? Have you implemented policies? Do you?
I've recommended policies to the Board of Selectmen for the selectmen to implement. I've also implemented a couple on my own that are more financial related, and they were actually more process related. I'll give you an example. I just had a situation where we discovered that some purchases being made with some credit cards within the town were questionable. So now there's a new policy in place where no one gets the town credit card without my signature on there saying that it's okay and that the purchase is all right. It wasn't big, it was $1, but it was the principle of the thing. Yeah, I just kind of implemented that one on my own, just to make sure that the town is protected. It's, could be $1 today, could be 1,000 tomorrow. don't want to put those in place. But, as far as other policies are concerned, my job is to determine where they need to be, and if it's the selectman's responsibility to implement that policy, then it's my responsibility and my job to bring to you a recommendation for policy. I would craft it and bring it to the selectmen and have you all review it and determine whether or not it was appropriate to implement.
One more question is public safety, emergency management. How do you get along with the police and fire and those people that we trust to do the right thing at the right time?
So, as I mentioned, I drop in periodically and talk to my police chief. I have a good working relationship with my police department and with my fire department in North Attleboro. There were some interesting times when I was in Weymouth, and I'm sure that people have had conversations, people talk to people. A lot of that had to do with negotiations. It was all contract negotiations in a time when the town had no money, and it was a very difficult process that we went through. But we were able to get through that, and some of those folks that were adversarial at the time, I've had conversations with since, and on a personal level, it's, there's business and it's personal. As long as we can keep those two separate, we're good to go. But, we've had other discussions in the past, since, and those have been actually beneficial to them, because I gave them some insight into some things that were going on.
Are you familiar with our 70-30 split
For
for the
health
budget?
insurance? or
No,
the budget?
for schools get 70%
school.
of the operating budget, new revenues, and we get 30.
That's about par for the course for every community at this stage. Yeah, they're all about the same. They're all in that 70-30, 75-25, 65-35. It varies, but it's all right around the same place as far as what the budgets are.
Mr. Penny?
All right, thank you. So I'm going to touch a little more on the finance. What have been your responsibilities regarding the preparation of the annual town budget with North Attleboro?
So my job is to actually prepare the capital improvement plan and the budget for the Finance Committee. I meet with all of the department heads, and we put together a capital improvement plan. We talked through all of the items that they have requested. Actually did make a change there, a policy change. We used to do a 10-year capital plan and a 5-year budget. We now do a 10-year budget and a 20-year capital plan. And that was something that I implemented because I don't think you can do a good capital plan in 10 years. I think you need to be looking 20 years out, particularly for some of the more expensive pieces that you're going to run into with your infrastructure, your buildings, your larger purchases that you need to be looking out that 20-year window. But my job is to actually build that budget, bring it to the Board of Selectmen, have the Board of Selectmen accept or adopt or approve that budget to then take it to the Finance Committee. And then we have an interesting, when I was in Weymouth, our Finance Committee took on a very active role in the budget process. So once the administration recommended the budget and put it forward, this was before we changed to form of government. I've been involved in the town a long time. So when we were a town meeting form of government, once we put that forward, then FinCom would grab that, and FinCom would hold the hearings and do all the meetings with the boards, et cetera. North Attleboro does it very differently. The Finance Committee takes a much less active role in the process. So I actually wind up owning the process from start to finish. So building it, bringing it to the Board of Selectmen, getting a vote from the Board of Selectmen, defending it with the Finance Committee, and then defending it at town meeting. It's not the Finance Committee that defends the budget at town meeting, it's me. So it's kind of an interesting role. It's almost a town manager kind of role, but without the town manager.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
town
the
manager.
The duties and.
Yeah, the duties,
The name,
responsibilities, and the title.
Yeah.
We did just change our form of government. We are going to a town manager, town council form of government July 1st. We'll be changing that, but it's a very different kind of role. From what I understand, in Rockland, your FinCom takes a much more active role, which would be great.
As now does the Board of Selectmen as well.
Which is awesome. I welcome that. It makes
Get a
my
few
job a
former-
lot easier if I have
former
other
members.
people involved in vetting all of this. But yeah, it's an interesting process that we follow in North Attleboro.
Okay. What's your experience with OPEB?
We've been trying to work to get our OPEB liability in line. Our OPEB is about 240 million, I think, somewhere in that ballpark.
I feel better.
Yeah. Sorry, every community is different. We have an electric light department also, which is very separate and distinct. Our electric light department, their OPEB liabilities, they're almost there. So they've been working on that. We've also been working for a number of years with the enterprise funds, so water, sewer, and then we also have a solid waste enterprise fund. So with those three, we've been trying to attack that. We started there with those particular departments, and because they're enterprise funds, it was a little easier to put some money aside every year. We adopted a policy in 2015 to fund OPEB. So we actually make it part of the budget process, and it's actually factored into the budget. And we look at the number of hires that we anticipate having, and then we make sure that we put enough aside every year to cover their OPEB liability going forward. This year, I'm actually asking the Board of Selectmen to do something a little different, and they accepted it. We actually changed our health insurance carrier from the Southeastern, carrier, the group. We went from the Southeastern Massachusetts Health Group to Maya. And when we did that, we had about a $1.8 million check that we just got from the trust fund. My recommendation to the board was to use that for our OPEB, some of that for our OPEB liability, some of it's going back to the employees. But we have a meeting next week with the employees to try to talk to them about maybe we do something collaborative with their OPEB liability, so that everybody can benefit from that. And then the balance, before I got to North Attleboro, they were doing kind of a rob Peter to pay Paul process to do their budgeting, so they were taking money out of the stabilization account to budget and then putting it back in when free cash was certified.
Okay.
That worked great until we had that year where our snow
When
and
you
ice
didn't have free-
deficit was 1.2 million,
Yeah.
and you got nothing. So we've been trying to replenish that and put money back in. There's another policy where we put in our free cash. 75% of our free cash every year goes into our stabilization. My recommendation this year is to put that $1 million of that 1.8 into our stabilization account. Brings us to the 5% that we need, because we're at about a $100 million budget. So that gives us our 5% will be about $5 million, a little bit more. And then to adopt a new policy whereby we put money, not that 75% every year from our free cash into stabilization, but start to reduce that a little bit, but still continue to put money into stabilization, so that we build that from a fiscal responsible process. We still do that, put some into OPEB every year, and rather than making it part of the budget process.
Okay, thank you. One other question. We have an outdated master plan as well as a antiquated town charter. So those are two projects that we're looking to start to undertake. Do you have any experience in helping develop a master plan or a town charter?
So I was not in developing them per se. We had a charter commission in both Weymouth and in North Attleboro to actually build the charter. But certainly having input into that, reading the document and understanding what it was that we were trying to accomplish, and working with the charter commission to make sure that happened correctly and happened properly for both communities. In Weymouth, I was still on the school committee. I was chairman of the school committee, so I had some input at that level. And then in North Attleboro, as we were going through the process, I didn't necessarily testify at the hearings that they were having, because I didn't want anybody to think I was trying to feather my own nest, so I sort of stepped back from that whole process. One of the things you'll find is my ethics are here, and they need to be. You need to be ethical in your approach to things, so I stepped way back from that process. And if someone asked me my opinion or had a question for me, I would certainly answer it, but I tried to stay away from testifying in those hearings. But certainly as far as being able to read the charter, understand it, look for areas to edit, make corrections, that's second nature types of things. As far as a master plan is concerned, when I came to North Attleboro, we had one in place, but it needs to be revamped, and we've been looking at that and reading through all the pieces and starting to look at areas that need to be readdressed. A master plan, unfortunately, a lot of communities do the same thing. They write a master plan, they put it on the shelf, and
And
it
then they
sits
don't
there.
implement it.
Well, they either don't implement it or they don't keep it up, and they don't
Yeah.
keep it up to date. So they don't go through it and read it and look at, this was okay, 5 years ago, but things have changed, so now we need to revamp this and kind of move forward and make corrections. And, you can make all the plans you want. If you're not ready to make those corrections mid-cycle, you're gonna step on yourself at some point, or you're just gonna lose your way. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
So you've had a great deal of experience in managing personnel.
Mhm.
How do you hold staff accountable and maximize their performance?
I'm trying to think of an example that I can use. I had an individual who worked for me when I first came on board in North Attleboro. And I don't want to go into a lot of the detail, but it was a situation where the individual was not living up to the level and the expectations that I had. I'm pretty straightforward. I actually brought the individual in my office and I sat down and we had a long conversation about, here are the things that I need you to do. Here's what I need you to be doing. Here's how I need you to be doing it. Let's work together to try to make you successful and me successful in this whole process. Most times that works. Sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, then you need to begin that process of holding that individual accountable and setting the deadlines and setting the expectations and making sure that you stay on top of it. It's a lot of work managing people and doing that type of process. But in the end, it pays off because either the person will come around or you'll be in a position where you can then do what you need to do as the manager and as the person that's responsible for making sure that things get done.
I know you mentioned earlier, I think you said it was 5 CBAs you guys are currently in the process of doing?
I have 5 left out of the 7
Wow.
that I had.
How involved are you in collective bargaining?
I do it all.
Do it all.
I do it all. I'll go to the Board of Selectmen, ask for direction from the Board of Selectmen, and then from that direction, I meet with I do all of the collective bargaining agreements. I negotiate all of them. And then, again, within the parameters that I'm given by the Board of Selectmen, and then I try to bring those in. It's not always an easy task, but somebody's got to be out there on the front lines.
Can you discuss the most challenging employee situation you've had to kind of deal with, and what made it challenging, and how did you resolve that situation?
Public sector or private sector?
You can pick.
I've had a couple. Again, I think I'll go back to my situation in North Attleboro when I came on board. I had a very difficult employee that was working with me who happened to be very close to me as far as position is concerned. I needed to do some things that were very difficult and that this person did not want to hear. A longtime employee of the community, of the town, resident of the community, which made it even a little more challenging. I didn't think the person had what it took to do the job and step up into the role that I needed, and eventually convinced the individual that they needed to retire and move on. It's kind of coming back to bite me now, but it is part of what happens, you know. That was probably the most challenging I've ever had, because it was a passive-aggressive type of situation, which I find much more difficult. I'd rather have somebody look me in the eye and tell me that I'm a whatever, as opposed to, being a little different and doing that whole passive-aggressive thing. I don't want to go into too much detail because of the situation that we're in here, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Like you mentioned earlier that you understand that we've really been prioritizing a lot of work with Union Point, and also like our work, just generally relating to economic development, but especially to Union Street, like in revitalizing the downtown, which like I know you've worked on, like in North Attleboro as well. Can you give us some examples in terms of what type of things have worked like in North Attleboro that you've been successful at? One of the things also, a big thing that we've been working to address are the infrastructure needs.
Sure.
Like relating to what we're trying to address, especially relating to water and sewer. And once you frankly accomplish those goals, then you have to deal with the community piece, like in making sure what we're trying to do really fits and matches with what the community wants as well. So could you touch on how you make that all work?
Sure. So I love my downtown, and I love your downtown. I love a community with a downtown.
It's very similar.
Very similar.
Yep.
And very similar situation. We were able to get a MassWorks grant to actually do the infrastructure improvements. We've been able to improve our water and sewer infrastructure through our downtown. When we did that, we actually also reached out to Liberty Utilities that provides our gas, and we did gas, water, sewer all through our downtown area. It was a horrible project. The people that own businesses downtown hated us while we were doing all of that. We still have a lot more to do. We still have a long way to go. That was strictly the infrastructure. The next phase of all of that is going to be streetscaping. So we've got a situation where the downtown, one side of the street is higher elevation than the other side, so we've got to put ramps in for accessibility to some of the businesses because of the way that the doorways are raised. So we've got to do some streetscaping things to do that, to make the downtown more accessible. A lot of it is working with, we have two groups. We have the Downtown Associates of North Attleboro, and then we have another group that's the Downtown Businesses of North Attleboro. So through the override process, I was able to hire a director of, or a coordinator of economic development. And it's one of the things that I've been talking about since I got to North Attleboro was economic development. We needed the engine. Our issue was not an expense issue. Our issue was a revenue problem. And I'm sure a lot of communities are in the same position. It's the revenue side. So I was able to fortunately have somebody come on board, and I've been working through him to bring some of the groups together. So those two business groups that were downtown, trying to get them, we finally got them to the table together. So we've got them now working collaboratively to work with us to try to determine what kinds of things they're looking for so that we can begin to develop our downtown area. It's a very interesting balance, trying to make sure that whatever you bring in fits in the community as well as fits what you need from a revenue stream. But we've been trying to also, so that's part of that, but we've also been advertising the town. One of the things that we were really poor at was advertising the community, and what you would hear is how bad North Attleboro is. Well, we kind of took that to a whole different place. We created an economic development website. And I don't know if anybody's been on our website and taken a look at that, but we did a video of the town and showed some of the, we did it in collaboration with our local cable TV group. And they actually did a flyover for us, and then they also did the video and the voiceover. So we have this video with a voiceover, and we try to sell North Attleboro and talk about our proximity. And North Attleboro is in a little different position because it's 495, 295, and 95 are all kind of surround the community. So we've got all these interstate roads that make us, I would think, would make us attractive, but it doesn't. I wish it did. I can't figure out why, but maybe it's the type of businesses that we've actually been looking at. But we've had some success with that. We've actually had people knock on our door because of that. They've said, "Oh, we saw your video. It was very interesting. We want to talk to you." But yeah, it's the marketing aspect of it. Getting the word out that we're open for business. We have one of the lowest tax rates in the area, even though we do a split rate now, which we didn't do before. We now have a split rate. But we're still attractive. You know, you go to Mansfield or Norton or Franklin, you're going to pay significantly more per thousand than you are in North Attleboro, even with our split rate. So those are some of the things we've been trying to do to try to market the town. We just had a fairly large auto dealer from Rhode Island has approached us, and they're looking to open up, take a couple of vacant properties that we have right now on Route 1 and build a very large dealership. I'm not a big fan of car dealers because you can't tax all that space that you have all those things sitting on. But the building they want to build is significant, so there'll be some decent tax revenue there. We're in the process right now of talking about a TIF for that group to bring them on board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Capital projects. Rockland is currently in the final phase of a significant roads project. We recently constructed a new middle school. Future capital improvement projects may include a new fire station, upgrades to water treatment facility, expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, a newer renovated elementary school, a fire station, and a community center. Tell us about any large municipal projects that you've managed in past roles, and does anything stand out to you from the learning experience you've gained through managing these projects?
Sure. When I was on the school committee, we built the addition to the high school. It became an addition.
Yep.
We actually were trying to build a brand-new high school, and that was killed at town meeting. So we took the next step, and I was actually on the building committee, the tail end of the building committee, but on the building committee to get that high school built. And it was an interesting process, an interesting way we did that by building a second building and connecting the two to make it one. We didn't have to do the upgrades on the older building to bring it into compliance because we really weren't doing a large enough capital improvement to that building. So we were able to build a new building, keep it at, was $52,000. Good luck building anything for that now. I mean, it's crazy, the prices. But that was one of the big projects that I was involved in when I was on the school committee. North Attleboro, I haven't been there long enough to do a big project, but we have a few that are coming down that we're going to need to work with, to work on. One of them is probably a new school. I've got a couple of issues that, in fact, I was talking to the superintendent about before I came in here. Some issues that we have in a couple of our buildings. We're going to have to address that at some point. But we're going to be looking at a holistic approach to what the town needs. So rather than doing just a school evaluation, we're going to evaluate all of the buildings in the town. We just need to get the funding to do that. So he and I are working to try to figure out how we sell that and how much that might cost to evaluate all the buildings. My town hall was built in 1974. We opened the door and haven't really done much since. We put in new heating system, but that's about the extent of it. And we had to fix some other areas because of a flood. But the rest of the building is circa 1974, including our air conditioning system that went south on me on the 29th of June of last year, which was wonderful, 2 days before the end of the fiscal year, and I don't have an air conditioner at town hall, and we wound up having to do some scrambling to get something in there as a temporary, just to get through the summer. But larger projects like a whole building, aside from the high school, that's really about all that I've been involved in.
What would you say was you see as Rockland's greatest strengths?
I think Rockland's greatest strength is its community and how the community bands together, and I think we saw that at your town meeting a couple of months ago. I think the people in the town of Rockland are its strength. They stepped up and they showed that they're united and that they're one. I think it's one of the big strengths that this community has. I think the other is your proximity to the city, to Boston. I would think that it would be, this community would be somewhere where people would want to live and maybe even work if if we can bring in the right business mix and model into the community. I think that would be a huge strength if we could pull some of that off.
How about, what do you think our biggest obstacle might be to going forward?
I think the biggest obstacle that you could possibly run into is a lack of trust in the government. And I think you've begun that whole process and you've worked on a lot of that. But I think that's any community. I think there's just this lack of trust of government. No one trusts anybody for anything. And I think trying to build that trust and get people comfortable and confident that you know what you're doing is a huge process. And one of the things that's been my buzzword in North Attleboro is transparency. Walking in the door, I looked at our website and I was appalled because I couldn't find anything coming in. So early on, I commissioned a group to come in and rewrite our website and redesign it and rebuild it. I put all of the collective bargaining agreements out there for every union in the town, both on the school side and on the town side. It's all public record. It needs to be out there. My contract information is public record. It should be out there. I commissioned a group called ClearGov, and we bought their product. And ClearGov is a product that lays on top of our website, but takes information from our finance system and puts it out there so people can drill down and they can see where we're spending our money, right down to the line items within our budget. And they can compare that to communities that are of like size. They use a whole algorithm that uses demographics and median income and median housing costs and all of those things, and takes a look at, you know, what's your community doing versus your peer communities. And I think that was the other thing that helped us get our override passed, was having all that information out there and having that transparency out there, because it actually showed where we were in comparison to not just the state, but all of those communities that are like us. So I think that's the biggest obstacle you have always and everywhere, is to try to get people comfortable and confident that you know what you're doing, you're not hiding anything, and that you're doing all of the right things.
Rich, anything follow-up?
No, I mean, the last is, what questions do you have for us?
I guess my question to you would be, what is it that, I know, and I've read all of the information, all the materials that you know, Bernie and his folks put together, but what is it that you're looking for in your next town administrator? What kinds of things do you expect from that person, and what kind of things do you?
I know what I.
Please.
So someone who team builder, doesn't have an ego, checks that at the door, has a strong financial background, is willing to listen, but is also strong enough that in their convictions that if they feel it's the right thing to do, that they're willing to go to bat, not combatively, but
Right.
you know, have a open debate on what is the best direction of the town. You know, those are some of the things that I'm personally looking for.
Okay.
I like a guy that can look you in the face and be honest. You know, if I don't expect that every detail of everybody's moment of everybody's life that deals with you is going to come my way. But when I ask you a question, I want an honest answer. I don't want to dance around. I don't want to say, well, you know, what if a frog had wings? Would he jump? Would he still bump his behind when he jumped? You know. And I want an honest. I just want an honest, direct answer. That's the kind of guy I am, and I just think that it's just a big thing for us, because we've been. I can't speak for the rest of them, but when we went through our process over the summer and all that was going wrong, the number one thing was the lie. I don't care what else you did, but when you lied to the Board of Selectmen, you lied to the town, and we got no more use for you, and you're done. So that, to me, you know, I don't care what white lies you tell at home or anything else, but when we sit in front of everybody and somebody asks you a question, we want to make sure that the answer we get is honest. But don't care if we may not agree, but it's honest, and that to me is the way you deal with people. I worked in medicine for 50 years, and I've seen both sides of it, and you know, I'm an honest, direct kind of guy when it comes to that sort of business, and that's the way I expect people to be with us. And And we don't get, when we get mad, we don't have to raise our voices. We can agree to disagree and discipline with a proper attitude involved. One of the problems that we have sometimes is people get in positions too long and they think that their position is more valuable than it really is. And they assume more authority than they really have. And I'm not saying you are, because you're brand new to the place and it's going to be a couple of years before you firmly establish yourself as the man here, you know, and it's,
Takes a while.
we want to make sure everybody's is going to be happy with the person we choose. So that's all I get to say.
Thank you.
I think for me, I'm looking for somebody that puts the residents first, always puts the residents first, and isn't dismissive, no problem, too small. You know, I think when a resident walks into the office, whether you can solve their problem or not, they should be treated with dignity, respect, and that you put all you can into fixing their issue. And if you can't fix it, you can't fix it, but they were treated fairly, and they walk out of there with a positive attitude and perspective experience.
And we're a customer service business, so we
Absolutely.
can't lose sight of that.
Absolutely, number one.
Yeah.
But we're not, you know, we're not in the customer abuse business though. So when sometimes people get themselves all worked up and at home and then come in and, you know, they want to get it all off their chest, you know, you got to absorb the first blast and hope that you can calm them down and explain to them how to get what they want.
Sure.
If they can.
And I think to bring everything, like everyone has said so far together, it's really harnessing all that. It's harnessing like everything that each person here has mentioned, all with the opportunities that exist with economic development, that exists with, you know, all of the staff we've recently hired to empower them and to support them and to make sure this, frankly, what I envision is a whole, like in many ways, a new government for Rockland is working, and it's working for the residents, and it's working for everyone. And I don't know, I think we're at an exciting time.
I do too.
Yeah.
Anybody?
You guys summed it up perfectly.
Thank you so much.
So,
You've done a great job.
well, thank you. It's
Great
been a
job,
pleasure.
and,
I thank you very much for having me
Mike,
this evening.
We're not going to make a decision until the next meeting, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much. I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
I deliberately asked him about Hedlund just to see his reaction. You know, he was there in 2015. He's got to know some stuff that's going on, you know? So, no big deal. Huh?
He worked on Kate's. He worked for her.
Yeah.
directly.
Oh, I know he did.
And he
Yeah.
was out when he came in.
That's all right.
Set?
All set?
They did? Sorry. Right. Yeah.
We can introduce Doug Lapp.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, this is
Hi, Mr. Lapp. Mike Mullen. How are you?
Nice to meet
Carol.
you. Hi, Karen.
Very nice.
Larry Ryan.
Hi, Larry.
Nice to meet you.
Richard Penn. Nice to meet you.
All right, we're here to, really for the next hour or so, and now we're going to start with Mr. Penny, who will ask you the introductory questions, I guess.
Thank you, Chairman Ryan. Douglas, welcome. So I want to thank you first for the interest in our community. I know that we've had some challenges over the last year, so we're happy that you showed an interest. If you'd like to take a few minutes to tell us about your specific interest in and qualifications for this specific position.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited about this potential opportunity, and I am going to do my best to answer any of the questions that you have. As you know, I'm an assistant town manager currently, and I've been in that position for the last 14 years. And really, for any assistant, the natural career progression is to ultimately become a town administrator. So that's sort of, the first answer for why. Just a little background about me, and then if I can kind of lead into the answer. So I'm just about 52 years old. I've been married for over 20 years. I have 2 sons. My older son is graduating high school shortly. He's going to be entering college in the fall. So that's a big milestone in our family, emotionally as well as financially, as you can imagine. So it's a natural point as well for me to look at it now. I'm also looking for the challenge professionally, and I'm obviously aware of all the challenges that Rockland's been through recently, and frankly, I think I'm up to that. I think that my leadership and my abilities with management and leading by example, promoting ethics, I think these are all things that you could use, and I think that I can offer. And I'm happy to get into more detail about my specific work experience and all that, but that's sort of a general answer for why I'm interested.
Excellent. What do you feel differentiates yourself from the others seeking this position?
Sure. Well, to be honest, I haven't done a lot of research on the other candidates. I know I've read something in the paper. And as a side note, I'll just tell a funny anecdote. I happened to stumble across the article in the local paper here, and it was funny because I looked at it and I read it quickly, and I saw they had photos of each of the candidates. So I looked, let's see who the other people are. And then when it got to me, that photo was not me. So it was sort of funny. That never happened before. So I emailed the reporter and introduced myself and said that was interesting.
Gotta love our local paper.
Yeah. So I asked, if they did want to have a photo of me, and they apologized and said yes, that'd be good. So I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll tell you the truth. Anyways, I did send them 2 photos. I sent them one of me. I said they could use either one. I named them lap 1 and lap 2. You can choose either photo. The second photo was Brad Pitt. They opted not to do that one. So I haven't really done a lot of research. I know that one of them, I think, is an interim administrator in Littleton. The other one's a town administrator in North Attleboro. I think my experience is a little bit different. Again, I've been working professionally for over 27 years. I started in New York State, cut my teeth, right out of college in the governor's budget office, where I was doing pretty high-level public policy and budgeting, literally billions of dollars. That was fabulous experience. I was single. Long, hard hours, but I learned a lot of things that were really sort of directly translatable, I think, to local government. In particular, things like negotiating with the state legislature. That was something that we had to do continually, and it's very different from other types of negotiations, I think, because it's a group where you can't just get a great deal and kind of do something at their expense that the next year when they come back, they're going to be frustrated and reticent and not want to work with you. It has to be something that all sides have to win and be able to feel comfortable with. And so I learned a lot of good skills there, professional writing, budgeting, et cetera, negotiations. I also worked at another quasi-government agency called Health Research Incorporated in New York, where again I kind of honed a lot of my analytical skills, writing skills, and a lot of public presentations as well. Ultimately, my wife and I moved to Massachusetts, and then I worked in Boston for the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, where I, again, was focusing mainly on healthcare financing, dealt with a lot of, government regulations, looking at grant, I was actually administering grant programs, interacting with, all different sort of levels of government. And I should have highlighted in my New York State experience, looking at local cost impacts was an important part of my job. In New York State, the Medicaid program actually has a local share. The towns, cities and towns actually have to pay for a portion of Medicaid, and so understanding what those local financial impacts are, was important. So I did that in Boston for about 5 years. It's a hard commute coming from Cape Cod and, with my children, et cetera. So I was able to get this opportunity in Sandwich as the assistant town administrator. I say administrator because that's how it started. It was a town administrator, assistant town administrator, and I grew the position. Ultimately, that turned into the town manager and assistant town manager position, and I've been there for 14 years. And I've, in my time there, you know, not only did I kind of bring the skills that I had from my other experiences, but I've grown into literally, in my opinion, every single facet of local government management. Assistants are different in every town. In one town, someone might be called an assistant, and they may be kind of narrowly focused on just a couple of things, maybe just HR if they don't have an HR department, or one or two other things. But we're lucky, and I've been very fortunate because I've been exposed to literally every aspect of it. And I can touch on those when we get to some of your other questions. But I think that, you know, what I demonstrated in Sandwich with my tenure there, and I would, you know, I only gave, I think, 4 references to the consultant because that was really all they asked for. But I would literally feel comfortable listing every single member of every single Board of Selectmen over the last 14 years as a reference, and I feel comfortable that they'd all be speak highly of my professionalism. So I think that hopefully sets me apart.
Okay. What would you look to do in your first 90 days?
Sure. Well, I'll do mainly a lot of listening. I'm definitely not the type of person that's going to come in and just start changing things without understanding what's happening. So I would definitely kind of start with the obvious things of learning people, you know, getting some introductions, having people show me around both different town departments as well as the town at large. And I would do a lot of listening. I would both listen to staff, obviously listen to you as the executive body, but also try to get out into the community as well. And I know you have some different events that are coming up later in April, the Reimagine Rockland. I think there's a final visioning session for one of your Mass Works grants, that type of event. I'd also just literally reach out to some of your organizations. I assume you have Rotary, Kiwanis, American Legion, some of the businesses. So I would make myself accessible. I would do a lot of listening, and then obviously prioritize, you know, what I think the most important things to hit are. Certainly the thing that you led off with, kind of some of the troubles that you've had in the past, I wouldn't kind of ignore that or brush that aside. I would take that head on, and I have some thoughts about how I would, again, lead by example, but start off by promoting what I think are strong ethical standards.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Could you give us examples of your management style and how you motivate staff within the town hall?
Sure. So my style is very direct. I'm definitely not someone who people would ever say they don't understand where I'm coming from or what I mean. So I'm definitely very direct. And so I tell people this is, you know, this is what I'm looking for. I give them direction, an explanation of making sure that it's sort of measurable and attainable so they understand clearly what I'm looking for, and then follow up. So, for example, I have regular department head meetings with all our departments. Some of them I do individually, others, depending on the nature of the departments, if they're more interrelated with other departments, I'll do that as a group. I can give examples of that if you like. But I meet regularly, and when I do that, you know, it's different in Sandwich. We're spread out in multiple town buildings. We don't have a consolidated town hall, unfortunately. But I make an effort to go out to those other department buildings so that I have a presence there, meet in their space. And that's, I think, first and foremost, I think I'm clear and I'm fair, and I definitely follow up with people so they always understand where I'm coming from and where they're at. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. If we spoke to people who you supervised, how would they describe you?
It's funny. When I left work today, our HR director, who's in the office right across from me, who I didn't use as a reference again because it's limited with, you know, with the number of people. And it's great that she said this because you asked the question. She said, if I was asked how to describe you, Doug, I would say 2 words: consummate professional. And so I would like to think that others would think the same of me as well.
Nice. Thank you.
You mentioned the events that have shaped our last year, and as you can imagine, those events, they've impacted each of us. They've especially impacted our department heads and employees here. They've impacted, frankly, how the residents and the business leaders in the town trust us and trust their town government, and we're continuing to build that, rebuild that as we move forward, and as well as how we're really viewed and perceived by the outside world, whether we're applying for a MassWorks grant to the administration or whatever we're doing now, we have this association with us, obviously, and that's what we're trying to overcome. But this opportunity, frankly, I think we're all excited about the opportunity to really reset and really recreate our whole town government. And in many ways, based on the hires we made, based on the hire that we're about to make, and how would you approach all that in this whole environment, we're in with our residents, with employees, with from department heads to frontline clerical staff, the whole gamut. How would you help us envision a new future, I guess?
Sure. That's a big question, and that's
I understand.
That's
your
and it's a
task.
great question. Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's a tough one. Obviously, trust and confidence is something that can be very quickly destroyed, as you alluded to, but it does take a little time to rebuild. So I wouldn't want to give a false impression that something could overnight, have a completely different kind of brand or image. But I do think, there's a couple of things. Certainly one is leading by example, and I really believe that. Just whether it's little things like showing up on time and acting appropriately and listening to people, I think that goes a long way in doing those types of things consistently. And when I say listen, I mean actually listening, not just kind of waiting until you can say the next thing you wanted to say. Again, I think that a lot of outreach, not just in town hall, but outreach within the community is important. I think you have another event I read about, maybe it's in June, where there's like an outdoor event and a 5K and a wiffle ball, and actually being out in those types of events, I think is important. I was looking through your town meeting warrant that's coming up in May, and I think when I was looking through it, I saw that you have a charter review commission that's being authorized. So obviously I'd want to understand where you were coming from and what you were thinking about updating your charter, because obviously that framework could have a big effect on what you're talking about. But I think not only my listening, but I think all of and I'll temporarily put myself in this position,
please.
Listening to what the community is asking for, and right? So hopefully we'd be able to align some of what we're hearing from the community and what you think is appropriate and realistic, and try to advance those things. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
As I mentioned, employees have really bore a big brunt of everything that's happened. And again, one of the opportunities we see now is really creating an environment where our employees are really empowered and they're mentored, and they actually have real opportunities to grow professionally in their not only in their roles here, but in their roles in their profession as well. Can you describe really how you help empower or mentor employees so they're able to grow and develop and
Sure, yeah.
those things?
So I think, there's a balance that you have to have between being responsible and knowing the details, but also not micromanaging. And I think if you asked any of my staff, I'm not someone who has their thumb on people and micromanages them. You have to give a little bit of freedom to staff to be able to succeed and sometimes make mistakes. And one of the first things I always tell everyone is, it's okay if there's a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Just tell us as soon as you find out, so we can figure out where we go from there. And I think in a lot of organizations that are having problems, people feel afraid to acknowledge that they made a mistake because they might get yelled at, or there might be a bad repercussion, and things just get worse. So that's certainly one thing, is giving people the freedom to do their work, not be micromanaged, the freedom to make mistakes and know that if they are responsible about it and come forward, that we can deal with that. One of the things that we've done in Sandwich, which I can't take credit for instituting, but I'm involved in it, is there's a local program with Suffolk University where each town on Cape Cod can get a certain number of slots, and we can pay for a select number of employees to take graduate level courses, and they're taught at Barnstable Town Hall. And I forgot the name of the program, it's escaping me at the moment. But what we do is we allow the employees for, it could be like 6 months, it's a pretty long period of time, all day Friday, every Friday, work time. They all go to Barnstable Town Hall, and there's graduate level courses taught by probably Bernie Lynch, as well as others. And they get, when they're done, they get a certificate that's good for, not only is the certificate a meaningful thing in and of itself, if that's all they want to do, but they would then get credit for, it's a good number of graduate level courses toward their MPA if they want to move toward that. I think it's like maybe even 6 classes they get credit for, something significant. So that's been a fabulous thing. Almost too good in a sense, because we've actually had a couple employees, once they've completed it, move on to other jobs elsewhere, and that's, sort of the price we pay. But it's something that we think is important internally for our organization, because they learn things, and it's good for us, and it also is helping them professionally advance their education and their career.
What about, I mean, in terms of all rebuilding our trust, like in working with all these stakeholders we have to work with in town government, whether it's like a member of the finance committee to the local chamber of commerce to the CEO of like our biggest business in town. How would you approach those relationships,
Sure.
I guess, as well?
And I guess I would start by saying I truly believe I've done an exceptional job of that in Sandwich. And, whether it's our Chamber of Commerce, who, interestingly, one of the more recent executive directors left, and he's now with Mass Development. I was talking with him the other day, and he's actually in the South region. Rockland is one of his towns, so I have connections with that person. But for example, with the Chamber of Commerce, we had a need in Sandwich where they were constantly renting space in different small buildings that wasn't really suitable for them. Ultimately, they were looking to build their own structure, have their own more professional chamber building, but they couldn't afford to buy land and buy a building. So we ended up working with them, and we gave them town land for free, $1 a year lease, and they constructed the building. And it was a great, I hate using the jargon, public-private partnership, but it really was. And it was an excellent example of how figuring out a way that didn't really cost the taxpayers any cash, but yet gave the chamber something significant that enabled them to really, improve their services. And then just as far as, say, with big corporations, one of the biggest entities in Sandwich, we have a huge power plant, which you've probably all seen driving over the Sagamore Bridge. And again, I cannot take credit for this on my own. This is something I worked with the town manager over the years, and there have been multiple entities that have owned it. Sometimes they've, got bought. But we forged excellent relationships with them, and so far that when they were considering building a new unit, a new power generating unit, they approached us and said, we want to feel you out to understand, are you going to fight us on this, or are you going to work with us? Because you're going to fight us, like, we're not going to want to deal with it. We understood that this would have a hugely positive impact on the town, and we told them, yes, we want to work with you. These are the steps we think we'll have to, we laid it out. These are what we think the obstacles might be. Here's where we think we could help in areas like participating with the Energy Facility Siting Board and actually testifying on their behalf, working with the Cape Cod Commission. Long story short, fast forward through multiple years of it, they got all the approvals, it's been constructed, it's now online, and for Sandwich, this is enormous. It's about $300 million of new growth added to Sandwich. Massive, massive for us. And I guess my point is, it's not rocket science from us, it's just, being professional, being responsive, listening, trying to, listening, what is it they need, us figuring out if it's something that works for us, and being honest with them. Like, we don't, you're going to have these constraints, these problems, we can't really fix that, but here's how we might be able to help in some other areas, and just stay in the course. Those are a couple examples.
No, that's perfect. You nailed it, frankly. One of the last question along the same lines is obviously, like in every community, there's like a give and take between the town side and the school department, and just navigating that relationship. Some community that's done very well and very harmonious, and others it's more of a challenge. How do you approach that, and how do you see the role of a town administrator in that?
Sure. Well, again, I'll start. I keep going back to my references, and I'm surprised I'm doing this so often. But again, one of my 4 references that I gave to the consultant was of the Sandwich School Superintendent, because I have an outstanding working relationship with them. And I'm actually very proud of that, because it took a long time to get there. And you're right that every town struggles with the town versus school funding issue. It's by design. That's how that's how it's structured. And it's funny, when I started 14 years ago, it was one of the first meetings, there was a joint meeting with the selectmen and the school committee. And I didn't know, I just started, I wasn't familiar with this stuff. And they were fighting over the budget. And it got so bad in the middle of the meeting, the entire school committee got up and walked out. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be hard. But slowly over time, relationships improved. And and I believe I put this in my resume, one of the things I'm most proud of, probably more than anything, was that I was one of the founding members of a school safety group that we implemented, which is, I think, a pretty unique thing in the Commonwealth. And it started, years ago when there were some school shootings over a decade ago. And it was, one of the selectmen said, we want to look at where we're at and let's figure out a way to work together and make schools safer. Just simple as that. And it was interesting because when we went back to our offices, we thought, police does their thing and fire's doing their thing, and we're not sure what the school's doing, and it wasn't really coordinated enough. And even within the school department, the different schools weren't all doing the same thing. So we got a team together, and at the time, it was the second in command of each of the entities. So it was myself as the assistant town manager, the lieutenant in the police department, a lieutenant in the fire department, kind of second command at the schools, people that could get a lot done and weren't getting pulled in a lot of other directions. And we formed this group, got resources together, prioritized, started with capital purchases, radios, locks, buzzers, standardizing procedures, building our way to building emergency response teams, BERT teams, looking at all different kinds of other ALICE training, things like that that you may have heard of. So and that's the kind of thing where, again, it's not just going to a meeting and talking. It's really like rolling up our sleeves. I mean, this is all extra work on top of everything else we were doing to try to figure out a way to improve things. And we actually took it so far, and I think this is completely unique. To this day, in the town manager's budget, the Board of Selectmen town manager's budget, we allocate over $20,000 a year for our school safety group, which I think is an incredible show of cooperation. But just in general, I talk to the school superintendent regularly. She calls me regularly. Her facilities director, her IT director. I mean, we find ways to collaborate, whenever possible. And a lot of it's personalities, frankly. Sometimes some personalities are a little more parochial, and that's a little bit more difficult. But I'm proud that we have a lot of open-minded people, and it's. And we have a good system going. And I know I watched a few of your meetings online, and I know that the schools are very important to Rockland. You spend a lot of money on the school department, and I think you're proud of it from what I can see. And that's wonderful. I think that's wonderful. And we spend a lot of money in our school department too. I think it's about 70% of our budget goes to schools. So it's equally important where I am currently.
Thank you. Sorry.
So as Selectman Mullen alluded to, we had some issues in 2018. One of the things that came from that is a very active hands-on Board of Selectmen. Can you describe the relationship that you envision for working with this Board of Selectmen?
Sure. Well, again, I would have to start by understanding, where you're coming from, because you're the boss. I'm not the boss. I'm taking my direction from you. And that was part of why I mentioned the Charter Review Commission, because when I look through the charter, I see that there's a number of department heads that are just directly elected by voters.
Yeah.
And so that obviously plays into this challenge,
Sure,
plays into it as well. So I would first have to understand what you wanted to do, right? I obviously have my own thoughts. In Sandwich, it's a different environment. We've made some progress over the years. We currently only have one remaining department head that's elected. The town manager, hires all department heads. Our process and our charter is the town manager brings one name forward to the board for an up or down vote. That's it. And then once that person is hired, all discipline, termination, everything rests with the town manager. And there's obviously a lot of other structures as well. I think personally it could be awkward to have too much direct management by an elected board that has to convene in public meetings, with minutes and all that. I think that can be awkward and pose a lot of challenges. So I don't want to give you a final answer because I don't know it yet, but these are all things I think we'd have to talk about.
No, I mean, it was never, I don't think when any of us ran for any position, we expected the level of hands-on that we've had to in the last year. So with that said, how would you seek to establish clear direction in setting goals and objectives?
Sure. I mean, and I guess the premise of all this is you're not full-time selectmen, so you shouldn't be running the day-to-day operations. I mean, that's why you have an administrator. So ultimately, you know, the idea is to work with the board to get clear policy direction. You should be setting the goals, the objectives, setting the policies, and then turning it over to the administrator and the staff to implement them. I mean, it's really as simple as that. But where it gets confusing can be if there's differences between the board, and I've dealt with that before. That can be very, very difficult when board members don't agree, or if one board member wants to give direction maybe outside a meeting or even in a meeting that the whole board hasn't agreed on. Because as you know, none of you really have any power or authority individually. It's only collectively as a body, right? So hopefully everybody's on the same page with that. And then ultimately, putting it in writing, having a paper document. It's interesting, in Sandwich, when I started, the selectmen came up with they called it a long-range plan. And it was, I'm not joking, it was probably 300 pages long. Lots of appendices and things, but it was this huge document that was very difficult to work with and update, and nobody really used it. And then years later, a new selectman came on board, and he's like, we're going to do it differently. And he came up with a great system where it's really like a 3 or 4 page document with bullets, and you just highlight, these are the top 5 priorities.
Yeah.
And within those, and they're ranked, and, right, and
That
so,
process, yeah.
perfect. And so you chew that around, and that's the document that I literally pin up on my bulletin board, and this is what we're working toward every day. And that's, I think, the best way to approach it. And I should add on that in Sandwich, we actually published that in our town meeting warrant, so the community sees,
Actually
what that
sees it.
plan is. Yeah.
So imagine a scenario where the Board of Selectmen is taking a position or moving in a direction that you believe would not benefit the town. How would you handle this, and have you encountered this type of situation in the past?
Yeah. Oh, yes, and yes, I've encountered it, and every manager, administrator probably had. So I think the short answer is, what I would like to be able to do in a professional way to give you my input, if you want it. If you don't want my input, if you're just saying, do this, well, then we just do that. But if you're receptive to input, I professionally explain to you what the pros and cons were and why I think this might not be the best option. But ultimately, once you as a board, as a body, give the direction, as long as it's ethical, as long as it's legal, then my job is to implement it. And it doesn't matter if I don't like it. And I'm never going to like every decision you make, and that's normal. We're all different people.
Yep. Okay. Right.
Continuing on with policy development, you've been around a few years. I'm sure that the policies have changed over the years and where you've worked in. And how much was your input in the development and the implementation of the policies that you work with now?
So may I ask, what type of policies are you referring to?
We have policies, I don't know, we get a policy notebook that says we hold certain, I don't know, I'd have to look at it.
Like
It's hard to explain.
Our financial principles and stuff like that.
Oh, like internal policies?
Internal
and
policies
procedures.
within the
policies.
town.
I
Just,
mean,
what policies have you
if you see
implemented?
the Board of Selectmen have a policy that goes against, it's like you said, it goes against what you think would be right. Have you been in the policy development business in your years?
Yeah, so, one thing we did recently was we got a grant from call it a grant, I guess, an award from the Community Compact, from the Lieutenant Governor's office, and financial policies was one of them. So we worked with, because we had a lot of things that we all did, but it never was really put down into a manual.
Right.
So we got, right, so it was great. We worked with the Bureau of Local Accounts, and they came down and met with us, and our selectmen haven't formally voted it yet, but we're just about ready for that. But it was, they came down, they met with us internally. We had the treasurer, collector, town accountant, town manager, and myself, and we hashed it through and had a number of back and forths. And that was just one example of bringing in sort of an external source that had a lot of good knowledge, because they also knew what was happening in all the other communities. Maybe this is a small example, would be, we had some equipment we wanted to dispose of. I think it was a used fire truck or something like that when I had first started. And so the chief said, hey, what do I have to do? And I looked and I realized we don't have a policy for that. But under state law, you're supposed to have a policy for the disposition of surplus supplies.
Exactly.
So I figured it out, talked to our attorney, looked up the best practices, and wrote up the policy. The Board of Selectmen, adopted it, and now we have it, and we use it all the time. And it's funny, the schools, you were asking about the schools earlier, they just asked about disposing of something, and I gave them our policy because they hadn't implemented theirs yet. But those are just two off the top of my head. But I mean, it all It all depends. You know, we have an HR department. We have 2 people in our HR department. So I work with our HR director on our internal personnel policies and procedures. Those are pretty far advanced, but we do tweak them. We had one actually funny one I can give you an example of, where we had a few years back, there was some real dissension within our Board of Selectmen where they were fighting with each other, and it got a little nasty. And so the board asked us to come up with rules for the board, which was unusual, you know, kind of a code of conduct is what they wanted it called. And so we, the town manager, the HR director, and I as a team, we researched it, looked at other communities, and we came up with a code of conduct for elected and appointed boards. And we proposed that. They had some suggested changes, and they ultimately adopted it. And so, you know, some things might be as simple as a disposition of surplus supplies where I can just do on my own. Other things like that last one are more complicated, and we'll work on it as a team. Other times we'll bring in help from others.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Penny?
Thank you. So I'm going to touch on the finance side a little bit. What have been your responsibilities regarding the preparation of your annual town budget?
Sure. So we do the budget as a team effort in Sandwich. And it's, you know, every town has a similar process where you have to start by, right, looking at your revenues, right? And, you know, then you're going to look at your expenses, and everybody's always taught, rule number 101 is be conservative, right? Underestimate your revenues and overestimate your expenses, so you can never ever want to be short, never ever want to be in deficit. But we, you know, we do it as a team. So it's our central administrative team is what we call it. Again, it's the town manager, myself, the HR director, treasurer, collector, town accountant, and we meet as a group. So we start by, you know, looking at trends in the past, what have we brought in from state aid, you know, what have our assessments been, that type of thing. And then on the expense side, salaries are pretty easy because you know what everybody's making, you know what the union contracts are, you know what we're going to pay the non-union, you know, employees. We do have a set of kind of generally accepted, I don't want to call them like principles, but sort of guidelines we use. You know, for us, tuition assessments has always been a big hit, so we always assume those go up by 10% a year to be conservative. We have different percentages we generally have worked with for, say, health insurance, things like that. So, you know, we put together a draft budget, and I think it's similar to what you do here, where the expectation is the town manager will, you know, submit a balanced budget. You know, it's not something that is left to any one person. It's not put off on the town accountant. It's not put off just on the town manager. He has to ultimately own it and take responsibility, but it's done, you know, collectively as a team effort. And like every other community, you know, you get the governor's budget comes out, you know, and then you start looking at the cherry sheet estimates, and then we start tweaking them as we go along.
You work with a FinCom or?
Sure, yeah. Work with our finance committee.
And how involved are they in that process?
Sure. So it's funny. That's a constant discussion that we have with the finance committee. You know, there's been a lot of turnover, and it seems like as new members come on, there's often some of them may not be as clear on what their role is. Ultimately, their job is to make recommendations to town meeting. Sometimes I think some of the members might get frustrated that they're not more involved in some of the policy decisions.
Gotcha.
And then, so there's often a lot, you know, there's a lot of push and pull. You know, for example, right now I mentioned that we're in lots of different town buildings. So we're actually trying to acquire a vacant bank and consolidate all our town offices into one building. So the finance committee sometimes can feel like, well, they didn't know about this sooner, but this was something that we had to act on quickly with a Board of Selectmen and executive session. And so we constantly have to kind of manage roles and expectations. In the beginning, I spent more time going to finance committee meetings more regularly. When we transitioned our town accountant position into a finance director position, that person ended up taking more of a lead role on that. Budget-wise, I probably play the strongest role in our capital budget. I lead the capital budget process, so I kind of oversee that whole thing. So we put together a multi-year plan. We have, you know, a form that we give out to all department heads. We collect all the requests, prioritize them, have lots of back and forth. And, you know, I staff the capital. We have a capital committee, which I think you do as well.
Yep.
So I take the lead role in presenting everything to the capital committee and making sure that ultimately we're all on the same page. So I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but I guess my main point is it is a team effort.
Yeah.
The town manager definitely owns it and takes responsibility for it, but he doesn't do it by himself. There's a lot of input from many of us.
What experience do you have with OPEB?
Yeah, well, I think I looked up your number, and I think
Everyone's smiling. Everyone's
well,
like,
you know what it
"Oh."
is? It's a smile because it's
It's the white elephant in the room.
yeah, and it's it's, every community's grappling with it, you know. We're putting more money into OPEB to help our bond rating. I think you're doing the same thing.
Yep.
I think your liability, when I looked it up, was like 90 million or some huge number, like every other community. So I think you're doing the right thing. You're putting money toward it. What we started, we created the account and we put $1 in it. And so we were able to say for a couple of years, hey, we have an account, you know, and when the rating agencies asked how much, we started, you know.
That was how we did with the stabilization, and we started going after OPEB kind of in the same thing. It was just, we had to start something, so.
Right. So we're now putting, you know, regularly 100,000 in, you know, as we're able to, you know, we're building it up. We've made some big, making a huge change with our health insurance. And I know you've done that recently as well, but, so we're leaving this huge joint purchasing group on Cape Cod, and we're going to a different group. And as part of leaving that, there's going to be a big chunk of change that we're going to get refunded to us. And our hope is we're going to put that directly into OPEB, which is going to be great because it's going to make a huge improvement in that account balance without really hitting anything else.
Yep.
So it's something that, you know, everybody's worried about. We have to be serious about it. We have to, you know, make inroads, but there's very few towns. Chatham is one of them on the Cape. I imagine some of the ones up, you know, maybe Brookline or some of the really affluent communities are able to put big money into it. It's unrealistic for us or for Rockland to be able to do that anytime soon, so we just have to keep doing our best.
Need a water?
I got it right here, thank
You
you.
got one. All right.
You know,
So we talked, you've referenced a few times the town charter, also the master plan. So we're looking at two things. One, both are outdated and a little antiquated. So we're looking at both doing a master plan, but also doing an in-depth town charter review because of some of the things that you even mentioned. You know, it goes back to 1970 and things have certainly changed since then. So what experience do you have working on a master plan or a town charter, actually
Sure.
developing, reviewing, changing?
Sure, so I've been involved with both. So in Sandwich, we have a special act charter. I think you have a home rule charter, is that right? I think.
Yeah.
So we have a special act charter, and when we were due to revise it again, we're supposed to do it every 5 years, you know, renew it. So we're due for that now. I was very involved with it last time. We had a committee, you know, so there's a lot of people, you know, had input. So I can't say in any way that I drove it, but I certainly was involved with it. And there's probably really only one or two things that we did this last go-around that we really don't like, and one of them is there's a couple of meetings that are required to have happen within a certain specified date between the town manager and the school superintendent and the finance committee talking about revenues, but it's very rigid for like when this thing has to happen. And conceptually, you know, we thought we could see why that made sense, but in practice, it was just a little bit too rigid. So that's like one kind of minor thing we want to change. I imagine we're going to most likely want to change that one remaining elected department head, you know, remove that, make that appointed. But it's, you know, it's a very hot button issue. You know, when I was involved with it in Sandwich, there was a group of people that wanted to create precincts and have like a whole sort of representative board of selectmen where selectmen, because at the time it was a kind of a homogenous board and they sort of represented they were homogenous. And so I think people were hoping to create some more diversity. So that got to be a very kind of contentious thing. We did not choose to, you know, to go down that path. But there's a lot of public input, you know, a lot of give and take. And it was interesting. It really was. And it's important, obviously. For our master plan, we call it a local comprehensive plan in Sandwich, same thing. So I was on the local planning committee and I did help drive that process with our planning director at the time. Okay. I think in your town meeting warrant, are you putting, is it $40,000? I think you're putting toward that? And is that in a match, so it's like an equal match, a 40,000 match, or?
It's an equal, yeah, and we've already got some funds in there from last.
Okay, good, because where I was going with this was when we did ours, gosh, maybe 10 years ago, I think we spent like $150,000 on consultants it's a fabulous document.
So we'll have close to 200,000 in the account.
Great, yeah, good. I was worried 40,000 was the expectation.
This is just to fully fund the last piece of it before we start.
Sure. So, so we had a great process. We had a very large committee, and usually I don't like big committees because I think they can be kind of unwieldy and just hard to work with. But this worked pretty well, representatives from each of the various groups, all the different boards and commissions, different representatives of the community, different staff. And I worked with a planning director, and we had an excellent consultant. It was Stantec, who helped create it. And it's literally on our shelf, and we still refer to it. We do need to update it because some things have changed a bit. I think the key thing is getting input from the community. There's times when you can't do or include everything that everybody wants because it would be too schizophrenic and you'd be fighting with yourself. But as long as you can figure out those key kernels of things that kind of cut across everyone's interests and include them, it was really wonderful because we had a lot of buy-in, on our LCP, and I would hope to be able to do a similar thing. That gets to another point, which maybe I'll ask at the end about, because I don't think you have a town planner here.
We do
That's something
not.
I want to talk about later, because that would be the natural person to lead that process in a community. But so that would happen a little differently here in Rockland, obviously.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
What's been your experience in managing personnel?
Sure. So we have as I mentioned earlier, we have an HR department, 2 people, a director and an assistant. They do an excellent job with the standard processes. So anytime we're advertising for positions, doing the ads, receiving resumes, communicating with people, interviews, all that, they do an excellent job of that. So I don't have to get into the day-to-day. When it comes to hiring, I'm involved with all the department head hirings and many of the assistants. It kind of depends on the position. So I'll personally review resumes, be on the review committee, interview people, et cetera. When it comes to like discipline or the more difficult things, it all depends. If it's a more formalized process, like a grievance from the fire union, there's a process, and I don't really so much need to get involved in that. I'd say my biggest role with HR just tends to come in with just sort of all the other issues and problems that can come up. So, I supervise essentially all the departments. So my job is to try to take care of that before it becomes anything serious that has to go to HR, and certainly anything before it goes to the town manager or the Board of Selectmen. And I do that all the time. I think I do a pretty good job with it. And again, a lot of what I try to do, the best thing is kind of preventing some of those things from happening. But, when they do, there's a path to how to appropriately deal with that, which I can get into later if you'd like.
So you said you're involved with the hiring process. What do you look for in new employees, particularly department heads?
Sure. It's interesting, local government is so diverse, so it depends. Obviously, it's great if somebody has some municipal experience, because sometimes while someone might have excellent private sector experience, it can be a little bit different in a public setting.
Right.
So often we'll look for somebody, with municipal experience, somebody with, the relevant knowledge, skills, and abilities. We have taken some risks with some people who we think, might not necessarily meet everything we're looking for, but we think they have the ability to learn and they have the ability to grow. And we'll let them know, for example, if it's, we have like a marina and a harbor in Sandwich. And so, if someone's going to be, say, an assistant harbor master, and they don't have that harbor master certification from the state yet because they haven't had the opportunity, we'll give them a year to be able to get that and, set a path and have them be accountable. And if you can't meet that, then you won't be able to continue. But, so if we think somebody has, the ability based on, sometimes you might do, I don't want to call them tests, but we might give them exercises to do, some assignment to do some writing, give them scenarios, how would you approach this problem or that problem? Obviously check references and interact with them.
Can you explain the most challenging employee situation you've had to deal with, maybe?
Sure. So I knew you'd ask that, and I was thinking about different examples. I think this one actually kind of gets to the point you were just making, so maybe I'll use this one, where I had a department head who was an older person who had a lot of private sector experience, owned his own business, he was his own boss for many years, and had a difficult job for the town, and had a particularly difficult resident who just wasn't getting what they wanted and started getting progressively more and more belligerent and getting nasty, and there was this back and forth, and it really kind of erupted. And I got a call that, there was an incident that was going to happen if kind of somebody didn't sort of step in. And so by the time I got down to that town office, because again, we're sort of spread out, the resident had left, But this department head was just raging, within the office, not in public, but was just raging and was, swearing, was upset, was saying, he's not going to take it and he's going to get him, and just all these terrible things that you just can't say, can't do. So I asked everybody to leave, and de-escalated, calmed everything down, shut the door, and we talked. And I tried to explain that, and I thought it was obvious, but I think in the heat of the moment it may not have been obvious to him, that what's different from the public sector and private sector is that we can't choose our customers, right? So in his prior business, if he had a really horrible customer like this, he could say, you know what, sir or ma'am, you should just take your business elsewhere and find somebody else. But we can't do that. And he didn't want to accept that and just couldn't accept that. And we went round and round, and ultimately I said, okay, we're done. We're done having this. I'm going to have to discipline you because this is not acceptable. You can't communicate that you're going to, quote unquote, get somebody or retaliate or anything. So I explained to him what was going to happen. I wrote him up. It was discipline. I said, we're going to work on this. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to get through this. And to fast forward, it took time. It wasn't anything quick, but over time, he got it, and he calmed down, and he understood, and ultimately that was able to note in his file that that is no longer an issue. And while it might be frustrating at times, he just, again, not ignoring it, not acting like it didn't happen, taking it head on, kind of de-escalating, communicating, documenting it, writing up, and then following it up. That's just sort of one example of it.
How would you handle a similar situation, but say the employee was elected, not appointed?
The employee was elected. Yeah, so that's hard, and that's, that was one of my questions I was going to ask you folks, was how you handle kind of performance evaluations for elected department heads, because I imagine maybe they don't happen at all, right? Every 3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
We haven't really.
Right, and I can understand that, and that's part of the problem with having elected staff. So it's very hard, I remember when I first started, 14 years ago, there was an issue with our town clerk at the time who was elected. It was an older woman who had been there for probably 30 years. And there was an issue, and I didn't like the way she was approaching something, and she was kind of going behind our backs and talking to other people that wasn't helpful. And so I thought I was being professional and met in her office and shut the door and asked her to, please not do that. It's, there's a chain of command, this and that. And she put her finger right in my face and said, son, I'm elected. I can talk to whoever the heck I want to talk to, and wagged her finger at me, and that was that. So that's hard. I don't have an easy answer to that. I learned from that experience, though, so obviously I would approach it differently now. We have an elected town clerk. If he was here, I would say all the same things, as I am now without him here. He does a great job, but I still think he should be appointed because there's more accountability, when people are appointed, and they can have performance evaluations and all that. And I think the way to do it is whoever's in the job now should stay in the job. I don't know any of the staff here, but I would just stay as a matter of principle. So there's no issue with that. They should stay in the job, become appointed, and then they can be treated like everyone else and have, more direct accountability. But I would talk to the elected, official. I would present them with the information, show them how they're being characterized, how it looks to others, because if it's something bad, I wouldn't think they would want that. Most people don't want to be thought of in a bad light, and just try to communicate it with them as best I could. But admittedly, your hands are tied when they're elected.
I agree. Very difficult. Thank you, though.
Sure.
Switching gears over to economic development, you probably have seen and read that the past few years we've made economic development, like in downtown, a really revitalization a priority. And we have like a 40-yard district that we passed that would now, we're still struggling because it is a contingent 40-yard because we don't have the necessary water and sewer infrastructure, and we have a lot of hopes in visions and dreams, but a lot of times we don't have the infrastructure to really match what's required. And then on top of that, we have just the typical parochial issues that come along with the town, and in addition to that, we have the big promise and the opportunity called Union Point right down the road, and and everything that represents in terms of growth, in terms of revenues, but also really, in my opinion, like a synergy that could exist between like a quaint downtown Union Street here, like in this big Mecca regional hub that offers a nice contrast. But based on your role in Sandwich, how have you approached like economic development, working with business leaders, addressing infrastructure needs, and really at the end of the day, like as you described with the power plant, making sure the whole thing really fits like within the community and will be accepted after all?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and I knew you were going to ask that one. Again, I probably shouldn't have shown my cards with the power plant one so early, because that really was something we're proud of.
Yep.
But there's a lot of other examples. And as it relates to infrastructure, that's obviously huge. We have even less infrastructure in Sandwich
do.
than you do here. I mean, everything is on septic systems in our town, and so that's a huge issue. We're actually, just as a side note, we've already got this passed at our town meeting, at our town election coming up in May. We're proposing to implement a water infrastructure investment fund, which would be a surcharge on tax bills that works the same way as the Community Preservation Act, but it's dedicated toward a water and wastewater infrastructure. So that's one way, and that's obviously a recurring revenue stream, because without infrastructure you can't get development. So there's a bunch of things, if I can take a minute, I guess, to try to answer the question.
Yep.
I have been to Union Point before. I've taken one of my sons to play soccer up there, so I'm familiar with the site. It's kind of surreal driving up there. But obviously a lot of opportunity. I know he just left, but I do know Paul Niedzwiecki, who's the Southfield Redevelopment Authority Director. He was the assistant town manager in Barnstable and the head of the Cape Cod Commission, so I worked with him for over a decade on the Cape. And so I talked with him quite a bit, and I feel like I have a good general understanding of sort of what's happened before. And that's, I'm certainly not going to overpromise anything as relates to Union Point. I think, Mr. Ryan, I think you're on the board maybe first, right? So that's huge, but obviously it all starts, with infrastructure. You got to get a good master developer in there who is ethical and, committed to investing. That's obvious. Couple of things, working again with our Chamber of Commerce. That's something that I had a great success with in Sandwich. I don't think you have an actual local chamber, but you have like a regional chamber.
We have a local
We have
and
a
a South
local.
Shore.
You do.
We have a Rockland and a South
You
Shore.
know.
A Rockland and a South Shore, okay, forgive me. So I would absolutely, we talked about the first days originally, forging a good relationship with that director would be critical. It depends on kind of the size and scale what you're working on. So again, infrastructure is huge for the bigger stuff. On some of the smaller stuff, there was something we implemented in Sandwich I think has been wildly successful, that if you don't have here in Rockland, I would want to explore with the department heads, which is we have something called a voluntary site plan review committee. And do you have something like that here? So what it is, and I'll give an actual real life example of it. So if you've been to Sandwich before, down at the marina along the Cape Cod Canal, there's this wonderful restaurant called Fisherman's View.
Yep.
Okay, so it was some brothers who owned a commercial fishing fleet.
Bob,
Yeah,
I actually know.
you know the Colberts?
I know him very well.
You can ask Bob what I'm talking about, and I think he will validate everything I'm telling you now. So they were looking to acquire this parcel, this odd little landlocked parcel. I shouldn't say landlocked, because a little sliver of it is on the entrance to the Sandwich Marina, but the rest was all bounded by land owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, which is leased to the town of Sandwich to run the marina. So they had no good access, but they had this idea for a restaurant. Very difficult. It's in a flood zone. Again, there's no sewers there. They don't have access. All points lead to difficulty. So Bob literally called me up and said, "This is what we want to do. Can you help us? What do we do?" So we have this great process called a site plan review committee, and I steered him toward this. I said, "I'll set this up. You come and you're going to meet with our engineering department, police, fire, health agent, building inspector, and Department of Natural Resources. We all get around the table. Come with your ideas, come with your plans, and they're going to listen, and they're going to give you some suggestions on how we can help get this done." And what happens with some developers or some businesses is they choose not to go through that kind of process, and they just want to kind of ram something in, and then obstacles might pop up and there's frustration. But Bob and Denny, his brother, worked through this way, and they understood, okay, flood zone, we're going to have to elevate this on piles. Okay, this is preferable if we try to do this instead of that. They listened to all the recommendations. They worked with staff. Everything flew through. got it constructed, wildly successful. And that's started a little revitalization, down at the Sandwich Marina. And I think that type of process, maybe we don't formalize it so much and call it a site plan review committee, but just, you don't have to always be reactive and just sit behind a desk and wait for the permit to get filed. It's okay to meet with business owners ahead of time and just help them plan.
Yeah.
And then it's easier for everyone.
Because that whole process went very, very well.
It did, and it went well in a very difficult physical
In the interest
environment.
of time, do you mind
Sure.
if we move on?
Oh, no, absolutely, I'm done.
So I'm going to go really quick.
Sure.
5 minutes, and I want
Okay.
Mr. Ryan to get one last question in, too. Rockland is currently in the final phase of a significant roads project. Recently constructed a new middle school. Future capital improvement projects may include a new fire station, upgrades to water treatment facility, expansion of wastewater treatment plant, a new or renovated elementary school building, and a community center. Tell us about any large municipal projects that you have managed in the past roles. Very
Sure,
quickly.
sure. I wish I had an hour, because I could give you a lot.
How's that?
I'll just say, real quick, here, there's a couple, and I'm really proud of this. We are just finishing up right now a $17 million police and fire station project.
Beautiful.
And this was a long time coming. This took
Combined.
years and years.
Wow.
And, we originally proposed something actually much larger that got defeated, and we had to go back to the drawing board and retool it and redesign it. And I'm proud because I've been, and again, I'm saying me, obviously it was a lot of people, it was a team of people, but there were, certain things that I really played a lead role in particular, hiring the project manager, hiring the architect. When I say hire, I mean writing the request for qualifications, assembling the review team, writing the review tool, managing advertising, managing the process,
Sure.
executing the contracts, driving that to then do the same thing with the architect, scheduling the meetings, organizing the meetings, public input. We had all kinds of information sessions. So I've had a lot of experience, certainly on the public safety side, and I saw that you're looking to do that with a fire station. And I am 100% confident that that is something like day one, I wouldn't need a second to get up to speed on, that I'm very knowledgeable in. We're working, as I mentioned earlier, on this water infrastructure investment fund. One of the things we learned from the public safety project, that first project again was denied by voters. A lot of the same people were showing up to the public meetings that we had, just a few right? So we realized with this wastewater thing where we need a townwide ballot to show up, let's try to do it a little bit differently. So we've created a whole series of videos, short 3-4 minute videos where we broke this massively complex subject up into little chunks. And we've actually worked with our local cable access company to have a little bit of animation, make it a little bit easier to, digest. And we have about 10 of these videos out, and we've been rolling them out progressively leading up to the Maytown meeting. So that's one way that we've approached it differently. But, historic preservation, $3 million town hall project renovation, Community Preservation Act funded that I was involved in, historic one-room schoolhouse. A lot of historic preservation we've done in Sandwich, public safety facilities, other infrastructure. We have a dam next to a pond by Town Hall. I was involved in that. I literally could go on at depth, but pretty much every aspect of public construction, or, designer selection, public works, I've been involved with all of it.
What do you think Rockland's greatest strength is? And I'm going to ask just quick three. Our biggest opportunity that Rockland has ahead of it, and what's the biggest obstacle to our success? Or what could be the biggest obstacle?
All right, so
So it's
strengths,
greatest strength,
opportunity.
biggest opportunity, and biggest obstacle.
In 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Go.
You guys are tough.
50 seconds.
All right.
This is the pressure.
So I've done a little bit of reconnaissance on Rockland. I've come up here a couple of times. I've eaten in a restaurant, spent time in the library, talked to a few people, but I can't claim to really know the community that well. But what I have gathered from that is there's a tremendous sense of community pride and community spirit, and I've seen that with everybody that I've met. So a strength, I think, is the sense of community pride, and certainly the commitment to your schools, I think, would be, in my opinion, from what I know, strengths. I think opportunity, we talked about economic development. I don't want to overplay that because it's hard, and it's not something that can be done quickly or easily. But when I was talking to some folks about I call it Main Street, I guess it's technically Union Street here, I think someone said this to me, and I think it's very true, which is that it needs some help, right? It needs some revitalization, reinvestment, but it has good bones, right? And I think that's apt for that. I really think it does. Obstacle, obviously you're coming off of, scandal, right? So that we talked about that. That's going to take time to rebuild trust. Certainly financially, from what I understand, you're actually in pretty good shape. You know, I've talked to Eric Kinshirf, I know him, I understand, you know, your books are in good shape, and so financially you're strong, but yet there's obviously limited resources, right? There's not unlimited resources, so that's certainly an obstacle like it is in every other community. And maybe the one thing I'd say is I heard this from someone, and from what I gather, I think it's really true, which is that some places might look perfect from the outside, but when you're on the inside, it's not so great. And from what I understand about Rockland, you know, you've had your troubles, and so there's this might be a perception on the outside, but from the inside, it's really pretty solid. And so I think that's your strength.
What do you have for questions for us?
So I did have some, but I understand
That's
the
all right.
interest
You can
of
look at your
time.
cup of
It's okay.
coffee.
It's important, so.
What's that?
It's important, so.
A minute? Okay, let's see. One question I had, and I imagine the answer is yes, but I just wanted to confirm professional development. I assume you support that?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I saw something in your town meeting warrant, like $15,000 for town administrator,
Yep.
something. What is that intended for?
So the thought process, we didn't know, going through this process, if we were going to find a candidate who was experienced. So again, when we kind of looked through this, there were certain things we were looking for. An experience would be great if the candidate had it, but if they didn't and they were the right fit, we didn't want that to be an obstacle. So we put money in there that in the event that someone needed some professional development, that we had some money in there, whether we brought in a former town administrator that could come in and help get things going, if there were some classes out there, what have you. But we wanted to make sure that there was some resources available to give the right person all the tools that they need to do the job.
That's great. I mean, that sends a really strong message. I think that's excellent. So I think personally, the ICMA and the MMMA would be important. I would hope that the town would want to,
Yep.
would fund those. Great. Maybe a quick question would be, what's your understanding of the cooperation between your department heads? That's something that's, you know, critical. For example, in Sandwich, our police chief and fire chief are like this. They work extremely well together. It's not like that in some other towns. Sometimes there's turf battles, and so just a question, I guess, is how do your
So
department
police
heads?
and fire work very well together, for the most part. Department heads work very well together. I mean, I don't see any major issues between them. I think they rise to the occasion. I think I want to say they've lacked leadership for a while, but I think they've been in a state of flux for a little while, you know, not knowing. I think they thought, you know, Marcy was going to be here for a while, and then she was moving on. So it's been kind of, I don't want to say lame duck position, but they were just waiting for that next person to come in and lead them. You know, they want to be led.
But it sounds like it's not a problem, like
No,
lack of
no problem.
cooperation. we should
I
have-
think over the last few years, our town departments have begun to work and collaborate much more and more effectively.
Great, that's super important, so I'm glad to hear that. OSHA compliance, as I assume you know, there was a change in state law where now municipalities are required, it's not technically OSHA, it's the state equivalent of the OSHA rules, and so there's a lot of work to be in compliance with that. And I wasn't sure if that was something that was on your radar, and maybe not yet, and it's something that ultimately down the road, towns really need to have, like, essentially almost like a compliance officer that you would need to have to be able to.
Yeah,
The only thing I could be wrong, but we might have, this might have been an issue that we may have addressed in our latest collective bargaining with some of the unions in terms of the training for them. But saying that,
I don't think it's addressing what he's talking about.
Because there needs to be, you know, reporting to the state and
Yeah, it's
documentation and training.
Certain compliance and
Yeah.
reports
Yeah,
that
it's
we haven't really
Okay,
addressed that.
that's fine, but I think that's something that I think should be on the radar. I'm almost done. We talked a little bit before about economic development, and I guess a question I have is, given the emphasis that you have on that, you know, again, you know, infrastructure, Union Street, Union Point, all that, where are you coming from with the position of planner? Is that something that's not really on your radar, or is that something that you, because
So I think when we were talking about it, it was something that the assistant town administrator, when we were looking at developing their job titles and
Right.
descriptions, that we were looking for that role to take on a more active role in the town planning, and the person that we hired actually has a background in that.
I read that, okay. So that's your
'Cause we-
expectation, is the assistant would play a lead role in that
I think so, yeah.
function?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my last question is probably the one that everybody would ask you, which is the one-year probation that's in your charter.
That's why we need to change our charter.
There you go, excellent, that's great.
How's that?
And that's great, until then, until that's done, I guess my question would be sort of, what's your approach? Is there going to be sort of clear, kind of measurable expectations so that whoever's in this role will know how they
So
can
we're
meet
working
that?
on that now with interim town administrator Jim Purcell, and I think most of us have gotten our goals to him.
Yes.
And then, so he's looking at it, he's, collaborating it the way that you suggested, where, if all 5 of us have the same thing on the list, then that's a priority, and he's putting together the goals and priorities. Obviously, we get that to whoever comes in right away on day 1, is the hope, and then we do probably a 6-month review, I would assume, that would be factored in, and, just go over the goal setting and where you are to that point.
And also, to our detriment or benefit, it takes 4 of us to get rid of somebody. I mean, we ran into that problem, quite frankly, that we
I don't know if
had.
you read that on the news, yeah.
Right, the great majority, we had a 3-member board, but we couldn't vote on the things we wanted to because we didn't have a 4th person.
Right.
So, I mean, and we put that in there, quite frankly, I go back to when that first came in, protect the guy that was in at the time, because the FinCom was politically against them, and, they wanted to get 2 guys in there to throw them right out, and so we changed that. And it didn't work out for us in the end, but I think basically it did in the long run, because we forced us to make the right decisions to end the problem, rather than hasty decisions that could exacerbate the problem, so.
Well, that makes sense. I think the 1-year probation is a little unusual. I think generally there's a 3-year
Yeah,
contract right out of the gate.
I've never seen that come into play ever, and I've been around the longest, since '96, and even before that, with the people that, were involved, so.
We don't have a way around it.
There's no way
Well,
around it.
understood, but I
There's
think
no
as
way
long as-
around it, but, somewhere, it's not something that you have to come in every day, and if you and I disagree next Wednesday on something on the agenda, I'm not gonna say, we'll get rid of this,
You might.
No, we won't, because we're pretty reasonable here, and that this board, quite frankly, is one of the better boards that I've had the pleasure to be chairman of and to be on in 20 years or so. This is my 6th term, I guess, I just passed. So, we got a group of intelligent, reasonable, not politically connected through family members and all that other stuff. In the old days when I came on, if I said, this guy's an SOB, and you say, my brother-in-law? Well, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my cousin, it was like everywhere you went. So, I mean, it's no longer like that anymore, and the town is better off for it. And I think that the quality of our government is greatly improved. There's still, some issues to be dealt with in light of what happened here. There were things that we're going to put into place that maybe will prevent a similar thing, you know what I mean? I mean, you can't stop how people are going to be, but you can certainly make sure that they're aware that it's not acceptable when they start, So,
Well, that's very
anyway,
helpful.
we want to thank you so much. You were
Doug,
very
thank
good,
you.
answered the
Very
questions well, spoke well, did a great job.
Well, thank you very much. I
welcome.
appreciate being a finalist. I truly am appreciative of that, and thank you for having me. I'm excited about the position. I am interested in it, and I hope I get a strong consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks so much, Doug. Thank you. No worries,
Thank you.
likewise.
Have a good night.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Doug, thank you so much.
Make a motion.
I would like to make a public statement if I could.
Sure.
Just, I want to say thank you to the selection committee. I think every candidate actually referenced the professionalism of the selection committee, and I think it was a proud moment of this board putting together that selection committee that was incredibly professional, and for the second time in a short period, we got outstanding candidates through that process.
Yeah.
And thank you to Bernie and his organization. So, I just wanted to say
No,
that.
Well, we ought to say, wait for Bernie to come back so we can thank him.
Okay.
Bernie, we want to thank you for doing a great job. That's okay, no.
Don't get comfortable.
Doing a great, no.
Oh, we got a fourth
Great
interview?
job. Those are great candidates. Every
You-
single one of them is definitely qualified. Any one of them will be a good choice for the town of Rockland, quite frankly. It's going to be difficult for us to go through them, but we will.
No, you have to.
I know.
So, no, I thought 3 excellent candidates, and one of the candidates had mentioned the screening committee. Actually, all of them, I think, mentioned, all of them mentioned the screening committee, but the screening committee really did a
They did a
very
great
good job. And I was very pleased with the response we received in terms of applications, and I think you had, as you pointed, 3 excellent candidates to choose from.
Bernie, what was the total number of applications?
I always forget with that when I come in.
29?
29, so, yeah, so we
Yeah.
did well. We did
That's
very well.
excellent.
Mhm.
I'm glad we chose you.
Well, I'm glad you chose me too. So, if there's anything you need from me, you all know my contact information. Reach out over the next, when do you expect the board will meet again to?
2 weeks, right?
Well, it's kind of tough, because
Next
our next meeting would be after town, would be town meeting. So we're not scheduled to meet next week.
Do you think we could
well,
arrange to meet?
I think we
I
might
think we
want
want
to.
to.
I think we
I
want
agree.
to, I don't think we want to wait
Right.
2 weeks
So I
until
didn't,
town meeting.
I didn't know what we were gonna get from the candidates, whatever, and I know there was a conversation, it would be nice if we had, something to announce at town meeting. I don't think it was critical, but,
Well, I mean, we
it
could
might be nice if
actually
we could
meet
do
I
that.
think it'd
earlier.
be fair to the candidates. I think we interviewed them. I don't think
Don't
it
wanna
should take us
prolong.
more than 2 weeks
Yeah.
to
No,
figure
no.
this out.
No, no.
Yeah.
So maybe if you throw something on there for April 30th, even if
Is
it's
that
just
Tuesday?
it's Tuesday, April 30th, I think we just sit back and we talk about it in open session.
Yep.
And it'd be very basic, just keep it simple, one item on the agenda. We do it at 7 o'clock or something like that.
That's, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Get it done in a half hour.
Yeah.
Shouldn't
just
take
have a
that
quick
long. By that
conversation.
time, if we're not ready to pick somebody,
Okay.
there's something wrong with us.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
The,
More than the public knows.
okay, I probably won't be here for that. I can try to be here, but I have a class I'm teaching that runs till, it's the last class of the semester. I have to be there till the end on that one, so
Okay, good.
I may not be
Well,
able to
thank
be
you
here,
so
but I'll
much.
try, so. or
Okay,
I'll have
entertain a motion?
Great.
Can I just
Thank
ask
you.
Bernie one question?
You may. You can,
Just on the references,
Mhm.
how come they didn't provide the names of the people who gave the comments?
Well, oh, in our report?
Yeah.
We, when we speak to all those people, we try to make it as confidential as possible so they can be because this becomes a public document. We want to be able to tell the people that we're talking to that we want their full, honest assessment.
Okay.
And because it's a public document, we try to couch the language such that we convey to the board the message that we received. And within those comments, and I don't have that one right in front of me right now, but there are comments in there that if you read between the lines, you'll see certain strengths, certain areas that might need to be addressed, but it's not done with the name, so that the people can be totally honest with us.
Makes sense. I just never seen it that way.
Yeah.
That was interesting. Thank you for everything
Okay,
you've done.
great, thank you. And again, feel free to reach out to me with any questions on any of the candidates or any of the process that you're going through.
Thank you, Bernie, for
Thanks, Bernie.
everything.
Great, thank you.
thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Mullen? Aye. Ms. Nyman?
Aye.
Mr. O'Laughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Penny?
Aye,
And Mr. Ryan says aye also. Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant evening.
thank you.